The Rayquaza Rising arc is the final arc before the time skip in Pokemon Horizons, and it is probably the most action-packed one, along with the one that has the most backstory. We get to learn a lot about the explorers, we get to learn about Liko's past, and we get to see a climactic and explosive ending. This season is one that you cannot forget, and this video is a compilation of all of my episode reviews for this season. Remember, you can always check the description for the individual episodes if you're looking for any specific ones. Let me know what you thought of this season and the entirety of Horizons pre-Timeskip in the comments down below. Enjoy! Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 68 of Pokemon Horizons is titled Taking to New Skies. The Brave Olivine just dropped, and in this episode, our heroes take on the 3 hero Pokemon that they have. How will it go? Let's talk about it. The episode begins with our heroes talking to Rayquaza, the history teacher, who tells them that a scientist named Briar is researching things regarding Terapagos at Kitakami. They're then picked up by the Brave Olivine, and they reunite with everyone. They do their group huddle, and are ready to continue their adventure as rising Volt tacklers. After waking up in the morning and seeing a Dragonite in the sky, our heroes decide to check out the ship for all the upgrades that have been made to it. They come across a button in the main helm of the ship. It's a big red button and Roy's tempted to press it but doesn't. They go down and talk to Orla about her upgrades, which are more mechanical in nature, and it's about how she sped up and improved the Olivine. Molly has more stuff to help out people in Pokemon, and Murdoch has a brand new kitchen. Here we even meet new members of the Volt Tackler's crew of Pokemon, the 3 forms of Tatsugiri, and they cause havoc when Crocolore almost tries to eat one of them. Our heroes' Pokemon chase them throughout the ship, they see all the changes in the ship, and they finally arrive at the battle arena at the top of the ship. There, Freed brings Liko her ancient Pokeballs. With Terapagos there, it brings out all of the ancient Pokemon out of the Pokeball, and it seemingly asks them to challenge our heroes. And after being intimidated at first, they all decide they are going to take on Lucius's Pokemon head on. They land near a random island where Liko and Florigato take on Arboliva, Dot and Quaxwell take on Lapras, and Roy and Crocolore take on Galarian Moltres. The battle is split into 3, so let's talk about them individually. Liko begins with Florigato's Magical Leaf, which gets countered by Arboliva's Magical Leaf. She has Florigato then continue with Magical Leaf until an explosion allows Florigato to hide underneath Arboliva with her Flower Bud and attack with Acrobatics, causing Arboliva's Seed Sower ability to trigger. She then continues to battle. Roy has a Crocolore tank of Fiery Wrath from Galarian Moltres before hitting back with a Flamethrower, which also gets countered. When Crocolore gets put in the air by Moltres' Hurricane attack, he has Crocolore fly out of it and use Disarming Voice to do super effective damage against it. He then continues to battle. Dot at first had Quaxwell only dodge Lapras' attack. It looks like she's struggling, but that's because she's waiting until the area around Lapras is fully frozen before having Quaxwell slide on the ice and use Low Kick to do major damage to Lapras. She then continues to battle. Eventually, all 3 of our heroes decide to terrasilize their Pokemon at the same time and have them attack. Those attacks seem to do a lot of damage to the hero Pokemon, but they still aren't phased much. Before the battle can continue, however, Terapagos calls the battle. All the hero Pokemon go back to their Pokeball, and all of the starter Pokemon get out of their Terrastal form. After the battle, they thank the hero Pokemon for battling them, and Freed tells our heroes that they and their Pokemon have evolved and become stronger. He then announces that they're heading to Kitakami as Terapagos looks out in the distance from the ship with wonder. We then cut to the Explorer's HQ where Zerg is watching a video from Nidothing showing that Quaxley is evolved and saying that she will make more videos now that she's back in the ship. Meanwhile, Anya is looking at images of Sprigatito. Amethio then comes to where they're at and tells them that he already told him that he's been dismissed from all missions, but they're still loyal to him and want to help him in any way, so he allows them to, and he's thankful for that. Finally, we see that our heroes have already arrived at Kitakami with the upgraded Olivine way faster than they could have before, and here we cut to a camera looking at rocks with giant scratch marks on them before a shadow of a Cleavor runs by. We see that that's Perrin who's taking those pictures, and that's where we end the episode. An overall solid episode. This was really an episode to get reacquainted with everything in the series, get reacquainted with the rest of the cast of the Rising Volt Tacklers after their departures in the last arc, re-establishing the main story of the series, which are the 6 hero Pokemon and our heroes trying to get to Laqua. The battle was just a fun add-in to show that our heroes have grown, but you already knew that if you've watched the previous episodes. This just helps set up our heroes who are heading to Kitakami for the next story. It sets up Amethio, who will be doing his own thing with Zerk and Anya, and setting up Perrin as the next focus character that we'll be focusing on. It'll be interesting to see where the series heads in Kitakami. I can't wait. Episode 69 of Pokemon Horizons, titled I'm a Pokemon and You're Me, just dropped, and our heroes head to Kitakami to find Briar. Will they be able to find her? Let's talk about it. Our heroes arrive in Kitakami only to find it completely empty when they head to Masui Town. That's because everyone is at the Apple Festival, so in order to go find info on Briar and enjoy a festival, our heroes also decide to go there. There, Freed comes across Carmine, who has a Sinistcha. He really wants to learn more about Sinistcha, but Carmine doesn't want to talk to outsiders. So instead, in order to get information about Sinistcha, she makes him win in competitions. So the two go out to compete against each other. Meanwhile, Murdoch tells our heroes to enjoy the festival and gather info if they can. As our heroes are trying to figure out what they want to do first in the festival, Roy and Crocolore first want to eat something. They smell something really nice behind one of the stalls, so they follow it. When they get outside the festival grounds, there's an empty stall with a device there. A guy then comes out of the stall and says that he found this device thrown away by someone, but he doesn't know how it works, and asks Roy if he does. The device, by the way, is the Synchro Machine from Blueberry Academy. When Roy and Crocolore press the buttons together, they switch bodies, and it is a shock for all involved. However, it becomes more of a shock when the device doesn't work again, which doesn't allow our heroes to swap back. It seems like the battery isn't working. However, before they can figure out what to do, Crocolore, as Roy, smells something and runs towards the festival. Roy also follows Crocolore, telling the guy that he'll try to keep this a secret while the guy tries to fix the Synchro Machine. While chasing Crocolore, Roy is fascinated to see how Crocolore sees the world. Crocolore goes to Dot and Liko, and there they figure out what happened when Roy talks as Crocolore. He kinda sounds like the Japanese voice actor from Meowth actually, which is pretty funny. They decide to then continue to keep this a secret and go find the guy who has the Synchro Machine. But before they can, Murdoch appears and says he'll treat them. Their cover's almost blown when Roy as Crocolore speaks. Regardless, for now they decide to just enjoy the festival, so they decide to get some candy apples from Murdoch. Roy as Crocolore accidentally uses his fire to melt the candy and bake the apple, creating baked candy apple. Murdoch is super excited by this, and even the shopkeeper asks Roy to do it again, but they don't want to stand out and blow their cover, so our heroes tell the shopkeeper that this Crocolore isn't feeling well and leave Murdoch for now. While this is happening, Freed is beating Carmine in almost every competition. Every time she loses, she picks a different thing to compete in. She's lost every time though, so now she's mad and challenges him to a battle. Back to our heroes when they come across Molly, who's helping a bunch of kids who've gotten scratched up while trying to wear their wooden shoes. Even though they don't want to get caught, they decide they want to help. Roy's Crocolore once again speaks, but Crocolore as Roy is able to just say Geta, which is the name of the shoe and part of Crocolore's Japanese name, to learn what to do to help people out. It's a nice bit of pun humor. When the girl in the front gets treatment from Molly, she almost falls when she's done, but Crocolore as Roy prevents him from falling, I think, and tells her to wear her shoes and make sure she's okay. This will be important later in the future. We cut back to the battle between Carmine and Freed, and Sinistcha's Matcha Gacha lands on Cap, healing itself. That's when Cap decides to take it seriously and tosses Captain Hat in the air. He dodges the next Matcha Gacha from Carmine's Sinistcha before using Thunder Punch to KO the thing. Our heroes then come across Orla and see that she's struggling with something, so they decide to help her out. Orla was trying to help fix the stove of a stall owner who's trying to cook food for people waiting in line in the stall. Despite her best efforts, however, Orla isn't able to make the stove work. It looks like the guy might have to shut down his stall. But Roy as Crocolore gets an idea. He decides he'll use his ability to spit fire to help the guy. At first he tries, but he can't control the flame and he goes flying. He's caught by Crocolore as Roy. Similar to how Roy has done this multiple times in the past. It's a cute bit. They then decide to use their song to get in sync, and Roy's able to use flamethrower to properly allow the guy to start cooking. As Dot points out, even in their different bodies, Crocolore and Roy's chemistry is off the chart. After the stall is able to make food for everyone in line, it's able to properly close. But before they leave, a small boy from the line who's waiting on the food hugs the Crocolore and tells his mom that when he becomes a trainer, he wants a Crocolore as his first Pokemon. That makes both Roy and Crocolore happy. The guy with the Synchro Machine then once again shows up, telling Roy and Crocolore that he has fixed it. Once they get back outside the festival grounds again, they press the button on the Synchro Machine to swap bodies, and it works. Seeing this, both Liko and Dot emerge from the bushes. They also want to swap bodies and plead the guy. The guy allows them to as long as they keep it a secret. When Liko and Floragato press the button, nothing happens. When the guy then grabs its Synchro Machine to figure out why, the machine explodes, and that's that for the machine. Finally, our heroes arrive back in Masui Town. Carmine is still upset at her losses against Freed, when Freed tells her that he would love to compete against her, but he's too busy looking for Miss Briar. That's when she reveals that Briar is her homeroom teacher, and that she is at Crystal Pool, but you need permission to go there. And the main caretaker would never allow an outsider to get in, but nope. The main caretaker of Masui Town arrives and says that the Voltacklers have permission, specifically because they were helpful to her daughter and allowed her to enjoy herself. That daughter, named Shizune, ended up being the girl that Crocolore helped out when they were helping Molly. So because of that, the Voltacklers decide that their next plan is is to head to Crystal Pool, and that is the end of this episode. This is a fun episode to help set up the meeting with Briar. It was cool to see the festival from the game being translated, although I kinda wish we got to see more of it. It felt basically the exact same as the game with not much difference. I feel like the anime can make this way more bombastic, but I guess it chose not to. Carmine as a character is also fun here. We don't really get to learn much about her here besides she's quick-tempered, and we don't get to see Kieran here, her brother, but hopefully she continues to make an appearance throughout the arc. It would be fun to have her around. I do wonder if this episode and this arc specifically was made to kinda appease Gamefreak a bit. You guys are probably aware of the massive breach that Gamefreak suffered, causing a whole bunch of things to leak, and that included internal documents of conversations between Gamefreak and the people making the anime, where the people of Gamefreak were worried that this anime didn't have much to do with Scarlet and Violet at all. So it seems like this episode and this arc might have been made in order to appease those concerns. I'm interested to see how Briar will be depicted here in the anime compared to the game. In the game, she doesn't really do much besides research Terapagos and get proper permission to go to the bottom of Area Zero, but here it might be different. I really hope the anime expands on her role. I guess we'll just have to wait and find out. Overall, a fun episode that should lead to something. Episode 70 of Pokemon Horizons titled Tinkatink's Hammer Was Not Built in a Day just dropped, and in this episode, Dot's Tinkatink evolved. How? Let's find out. Our heroes are headed to Crystal Pool, but on their way, they're scared by a Bombardier dropping things next to them. Turns out, Bombardier are rambunctious Pokemon who would like to see people get scared by loud noises. Later, Tinkatink finds a metal piece on the floor that is super strong and starts hammering away at it. Liko acknowledges that Tinkatink's hammer recently has gotten much longer. It's pretty noticeable. And Dot says that when Tinkatink starts hammering things, she gets super locked in and nothing can distract her. Even when Bombardier, who sees Tinkatink hammering away, comes back and drops loud bomb plastic-looking thingies next to Tinkatink, Tinkatink doesn't even react to its explosion because it's so focused. Eventually, Bombardier gets annoyed and drops a pineco on our heroes along with Tinkatink and takes the metal plate away. Tinkatink begins chasing after it, including talking to a bunch of Pokemon in the area to try and find out where the Bombardier might have went to. Eventually, it trips and falls while looking for it and cries for a while. However, it gets back up, and it hears Bombardier dropping the metal thing near Pokemon and scaring them. After scaring it with Macargo, Bombardier drops off the metal in its pile nest before going to drink water. Dot spots it, and also sees Tinkatink going towards it. Tinkatink goes into the pile and starts looking for that piece of metal again. But before Bombardier can stop Tinkatink, Dot has Quaxwell stop it. Tinkatink then finds the piece of metal it was looking for earlier and continues to hammer away at it. When Dot has Quaxwell sent back a pan that Quaxwell got hit with earlier with Water Gun to hit Bombardier, Bombardier falls before terrestrializing in the overworld. Dot is surprised that it can do that here in Kitakami, which is going to be important moving forward. But for now, Dot decides that she can terrestrialize her Quaxwell to battle. However, before she can, a massive boulder drops right behind her and she loses focus and the Terror Orb. It's another Bombardier, its friend, and the battle has now become a 2v1. Quaxwell tries to fight off the two while Dot looks for her Terror Orb, and Tinkatink continues to hammer away. Eventually, Tinkatink finishes making her hammer, but it's so much heavier and bigger than before. She's struggling to pick it up. When she sees that Quaxwell is struggling 2v1, she tries to help out only to fail. Then it picks itself back up and picks up the hammer that it was struggling to pick up earlier. And as she does, a blue light begins surrounding Tinkatink. It's evolving. Tinkatink evolves into a Tinkatuff. Now, Tinkatuff is able to carry around the hammer, and it's able to send back the rocks that Bombardier was throwing at Quaxwell. Then, Dot has her two Pokemon work together. She has Quaxwell block the rocks that the Bombardiers are sending before Tinkatink hits one of the Bombardier with Brutal Swing. And then, Quaxwell sends back another rock from the terrestrialized Bombardier from Low Kick, only for Tinkatuff to use Play Rough to do massive super effective damage to it since it's a Dark-type, Terra-type, and KO. The overworld terrestrialization disappears, and the two Bombardier fly away. When Dot sees how much Tinkatuff has worked for her hammer, she's proud and gets a tear in her eye. They head back to the group with everyone, and our heroes look up Tinkatuff. The episode ends with Tinkatuff working on her hammer even more, showing that she still wants to grow further. I love evolution episodes like this. It feels like Tinkatink really earned her evolution. She worked hard for her hammer and was rewarded justly. I know I skipped a few things in the episode, like the interactions between the Pokemon in the wild, or the Rising Voltacklers mingling with the people of Kitakami Village. That's because it really didn't feel important. The best thing about those is just seeing the interaction between the Kitakami Nurse Joy and Molly. But besides that, the episode was really focused on Tinkatink and her trials and tribulations that led to her evolution. If this was the game, this would be like the second trial if you did the Arven story. The Bombardier makes it feel like that too, and I really think the writers did that on purpose. They wanted to give Tinkatink a worthy evolution which she earned to a fan favorite Pokemon, and I think they did a good job. This makes it so that now all of our heroes have a Pokemon that have at least evolved once in their party, showing the growth of all of our trainers and their Pokemon. Overall, a really nice episode that progresses our hero's strength. Episode 71 of Pokemon Horizons titled An Encounter at Crystal Pool just dropped, and in this episode, our heroes meet Briar and Perrin, the two DLC characters of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Will we learn about them? Let's talk about it. Our heroes finally get to the top of Crystal Pool. There, they see a sign that says that the Crystal Pool can allow for people to meet the deceased. They don't see Briar nearby though, so Frida heads out to try and find her. While our heroes' Pokemon are having fun in the water, an angry Milotic pops up out of nowhere. When they read the Pokedex on it, it's said to be a docile Pokemon, which is very different from how it's acting here. It then terrestrializes into a ghost type, which kinda matches the idea that the Crystal Pool allows you to talk to the deceased. Regardless, our heroes begin battling. They try and attack at the same time, but Milotic dodges by going in the water, and then coming back and firing back with Water Gun. Liko tries to have Florigato grab it with its bud the next time it comes around, and then have the other two attack, but when she tries it, Milotic just jumps straight into the water, taking Florigato down with the water with her. As they're trying to figure out what to do next, and trying to figure out the timing for when it might pop out of the water, Roy remembers seeing the yo-yo style bobbing at the Kitakami festival that Dot was doing, so he has Florigato use Quaxwell as a bit of a bait in the water. Then, when Milotic comes out, and it does, Fuecoco is ready to attack, and it does so with Disarming Voice. Milotic fires back with a Disarming Voice of its own, and it seems to calm down everyone in the area as the two Pokemon go from using moves at each other to just singing at each other, getting the terrestrialization to fade. Milotic then swims away. That's when Free returns with Briar. She says that something in the Crystal Pool is causing the Pokemon to act different. We don't learn more about Briar. She's close to finishing her research book that she's working on. When she sees Terapagos, she's super excited and begins chasing it around while writing about it. She then apologizes for it before we learn that the crystal in the Crystal Pool is made with the similar crystal to the one in Paldea, which is why the Pokemon here can terrestrialize in the wild in Kitakami, because Pokemon are drinking from the pool. We then learn a bit more about Briar and her work. Once our heroes tell her their stories about how Terapagos came to be, Lucius and the 6 hero Pokemon, and how they're looking for Laqua, we learn that Briar is trying to prove Heat's observation from the Scarlet book. If you played the game, then you know the story already. It's pretty similar. Briar is a descendant of Heat, and just like in the game, she's never really owned a Pokemon because she's so busy with her research. She explains to our hero that Heat was a naturalist who went down to Area Zero and came across Terapagos and named it. He also saw a bunch of other Pokemon who are now seen as more of fake or occult stories, but she wants to prove that his observations are true. It's kind of similar to what Liko's trying to do with her grandmother and her stories about Lucius and the 6 hero Pokemon. The two are connected in that way. When Liko shows her Lucius's notes, she's able to see that he has terrestrial form of Terapagos in his book drawn, and they're trying to figure out what might cause that. When they ask her about Laquarium, unfortunately she doesn't know much. However, she's still excited to hopefully learn more. Later that night, they go to the Crystal Pool with Terapagos to try and get it to conjure up anything regarding Lucius, since the Crystal Pool is said to allow you to speak to the dead, but nothing happens. That's interesting to me. Why didn't it work? Is it because he's still alive? I mean, Gibeon is still alive, right? So that could make sense. Regardless, the next day, our heroes thank her for the info and plan to keep in touch as she leaves. Back in the Brave Olivine, the Voltacklers are trying to figure out what they want to do next and how they want to find the other 3 Pokemon that are part of the 6 heroes, but they don't know where to go or what to do next. While they're doing that, Dot is taking pictures and videos outside of Masui town when she comes across a Growlithe that looks strange. She comes across the photographer who owns the Growlithe, and when she looks it up in the Pokedex, she's shocked to learn that it's a Hisuian Pokemon and that it still exists, and she wants to know how. But the photographer asks her for a picture first before she can divulge information. Dot at first is hesitant, but she ends up allowing the picture anyway. The photographer then says that if she can beat her in battle, she'll answer her questions. The photographer brings out a Leafeon, and Dot has her Quaxwell. Even though she's at a disadvantage, she has Quaxwell dodge attacks and then fire back with Low Kick. When Leafeon uses Leaf Blade, Quaxwell uses its Low Kicks to kind of block the attack. But while doing that and dodging, it seems to learn a new move, Air Cutter. So with a flying move now at her disposal, Dot has Quaxwell counter Razor Leaf with Air Cutter before using Low Kick to KO Leafeon. Since she promised to answer questions, Dot shows her the image of the Kleavor that she has. When we cut back to the discussion about where to go in the Brave Olivine that's taking place, Dot barges into her room, bringing the photographer with her, because she is someone who's come across Kleavor. She then introduces herself to the group, and her name is Perrin. And that is where we end the episode. This is a very info-heavy, so I don't really have much to say. We got the battles between our heroes and Milotic and Dot versus Perrin, but both of them were pretty short and they didn't really offer anything spectacular. One thing I will say is that I'm realizing more and more that I don't want a recap of the games in the anime like many do. The anime should be the anime. We can keep some of the basics from the game, but for example, the Crystal Pool event and the entire explanation is almost word for word from the game. If I want to learn those things, I can play the game game, the anime should be doing something more interesting than just the games. The main thing I liked about the whole episode was just the connection they made to Liko's story and Briar's story and how similar they are in regards to talking about family legacy. With a bunch of lore here and a bunch of setup over the last couple episodes, it seems to finally be coming to an end next episode. I'm looking forward to the story about the 6 hero Pokemon continuing, and I'm curious to see how they're going to get Kleavor to join them. I can't wait. Episode 72 of Pokemon Horizon is titled Pursuit. Search for Kleavor just dropped. In this episode, our heroes head with Perrin to look for Kleavor. Will they be able to find it? Let's find out. Our heroes walk up to Tengu Mountain to search for Kleavor after they found out that Perrin had seen it last episode. In the mountain, they take a break and they look at the image that Perrin took of Kleavor. We learn a bit more about Perrin here. She was someone who as a kid was told that she was super talented at photography, so she's been doing it ever since. In terms of where she took the image of Kleavor, she doesn't fully remember because she was in a hazy area and took pictures when she saw the Kleavor, and then when it attacked her, she ran down the mountain in a hurry. So for now, they decide to just look around this area. As they're leaving their rest area, Perrin asks Fried why he takes the kids along with him, and Fried says that the kids are evolving. While climbing the mountain, Crocalor is starting to get hungry and goes to grab a citrus berry on the floor when it sees one, only to get stuck on this rocky looking place. When Roy goes to grab him and pull him out, the entire thing collapses under them, and Roy and Crocalor fall to the bottom of a ravine. They're fine, and realistically they could probably come back by Roy having his Kilowattrel fly them up, but he notices a giant cave down near the ravine, so he decides that he will look through the cave to see if Kleavor might be there. While down in the caves, Roy notices some Pokemon he hasn't seen. The rest of our heroes come across a pack of Houndoom and Houndour. Looks like they accidentally stepped into their territory. Fried sees an opening leading to a forest for the rest of our heroes to go through, so he brings out his Charizard and initiates battle with a group of Pokemon. When he clears the side where the forest is, the rest of Liko, Dot, and Perrin start running that way. However, they're still being chased by a handful of the Houndoom, so Liko turns back around and battles with her Florigato while telling Dot and Perrin to continue to head forward. They do so. And after Liko takes care of the other Pokemon, she heads towards the forest too. However, when she does, it looks like she takes a slightly different path than Dot and Perrin. Back in the cave, Roy is seemingly lost, and up near the forest, Liko split up with Dot and Perrin. While looking around, Perrin tells Dot that she's been in this area that they're in now, but when she's trying to remember when, a Trevenant appears from behind a tree and uses Confuse Ray on Dot and Perrin. Liko tries to call Dot, but due to the Confuse Ray, Dot doesn't pick up her phone. That's when Florigato finds a deep gash in a tree. Liko realizes that that gash might have been created by Kleavor. Eventually, Quaxwell stumbles on a rock, which snaps it out of going in circles over and over again. It then snaps everyone else out of doing the exact same thing. Then, after they realize what happened to them, Dot comes up with a plan to battle Trevenant. She has everyone close their eyes when they're about to get hit by Confuse Ray. Then, she has Hisuian Growlithe use Ember right as she has Quaxwell use Water Gun to create a cloud that prevents Trevenant from seeing anything before using Air Cutter to send it back. Back down in the cave, Roy and Crocalor are still trying to find their way out when he hears water in the cave. The water has citrus berries flowing through them. Since citrus berries don't grow on trees inside caves, he surmises it must be from the outside. So he follows the water upstream, leading him and Crocalor to outside the cave. When he gets out of the area they're in, he's ready to climb the vines to get to the top of the cliff. Meanwhile, Fried is finally finished with his fight against the pack of Houndoom and Houndour. He then flies on Charizard to look for everyone. Liko comes across more gouges in the trees. She thinks it may be leading her to Kleavor, but then she also thinks that it might be warning since Kleavor attacked Perrin, so she brings out her Hatchrim to see if she can feel any malice in the area. However, Hatchrim doesn't. Dot then asks Perrin if she could see the picture that she took again. She takes a picture of it in her phone and zooms into it to see the flowers and everything else in the area. She realizes the habitation of these flowers are probably in swamps, and there's also a mountain in the background that kinda looks like a Dugtrio. Figuring this out, she calls everyone to share the info she has. There, she also learns about the marks that Liko saw. Once the information is shared amongst everyone, Perrin is super impressed by Dot and recalls her conversation with Fried and understands what he meant when he said that the kids will evolve. Roy climbs halfway through the cliff and brings Crocalor with him when all of a sudden they're attacked by a Shiftry being lifted by a Mandibuzz. It looks like they've trespassed into their territory. So with no real option, he brings out his Kilowattrel and has Crocalor sit on top of it to attack as a duo in a sky battle. Shiftry attacks with Razor Wind at first, which hits Kilowattrel, but seeing that, Roy has Kilowattrel rush straight through the wind in order to increase the power of his spark, since the wind helps Kilowattrel make electricity. However, before he can follow it up with another spark, he notices that Crocalor got hit by the electricity that Kilowattrel had, and he's potentially paralyzed here, I can't really tell. So he has Kilowattrel dodge Shiftry and Mandibuz's attack and circle back around them before having Crocalor use Disarming Voice on them, which sends them packing. Back towards Dot and Perrin, we see that they found the leaves from the images. That's when Perrin asks Dot if she takes pride in all of her wild adventure, but Dot responds that until recently, she was just cooped up in her room and she wouldn't be adventuring if she hadn't met Freed. She feels like she has a lot of shortcomings, which is why she's trying to gain as much experience as she can with these adventures. Perrin then tells Dot that recently she was in a slump, but she realized that if she engrossed herself in chasing the Pokemon she wanted, the results will come naturally, meaning Dot engrossing herself in catching up to everyone is her own type of adventure. Liko then sees another tree with more gouge marks on it, but Terapagos is also seemingly having fun with Ralts and a Petalil in this area, showing that Kleavor hasn't pushed away all the Pokemon out of this area, that maybe it's waiting for someone. Then, Dot and Perrin arrive to show that the rock with the scratch mark that's near Liko was the mountain that looked like a Dugtrio that Dot was referring to. Roy also arrives, and so does Freed. With everyone here now, they take all the clues they have to try and narrow down where Kleavor is. However, for the day, Freed decides to call it off, so they can continue their search another day. As our heroes begin to leave, Kleavor arrives on top of the Dugtrio rock, and that's where we end the episode. A decent setup episode that tries to get all of our heroes involved in finding the next hero Pokemon. This really isn't an episode about Kleavor. This is an episode really to show the growth of our three main protagonists. The themes of kids evolving comes up multiple times, and it's really the kids here, not Perrin or Freed, that find all the clues and make their way to the same area. It's meant to show that they're now strong enough to do adventures on their own without needing other people's help. It's supposed to show all of them have grown. As far as Kleavor goes, we're probably going to learn more about it soon, so we'll probably see why it creates the scratch mark around the area it does, what they mean. We'll probably also learn how it was part of Lucius's team, and we'll learn more about Laqua. With the next episode seemingly a battle episode, I'll be interested to see how its story will be introduced. I can't wait. Episode 73 of Pokemon Horizons titled Kleavor the Lone Warrior just dropped, and in this episode, our heroes face off against Kleavor and are trying to convince it to join them to go to Laqua. Will they be able to? Let's find out. Since last episode, our heroes got more clues as to where Kleavor is. This episode begins with them getting closer. They eventually come across a dead end near a waterfall, however. When a tree falls from the top of a waterfall, only to be chopped in half, that's when we see that Kleavor is actually there. When Kleavor arrives, the Lapras from the ancient Pokeball also comes out, and it looks angry. Liko notices that the scar on Lapras looks like it's most likely from Kleavor, meaning the two Pokemon might hate each other. They start going at it, forcing our heroes to watch from a distance, and the battle between Lapras and Kleavor is quick but an intense one. But eventually, the two Pokemon stop attacking each other and instead dap each other up. This surprises our heroes when they realize it's a sort of greeting. Then, Liko asks Kleavor if it would join them in trying to help get Terapagos to Laqua, but instead, Kleavor turns around and goes back inside the waterfall. Our heroes decide to follow it behind the waterfall. Turns out, there's a limestone cave there. Inside, there are rocks showing that Kleavor has been training here all this time. The kids end up getting split up from the adults when Hisuian and Growlithe decides to chase a Noibat. When Freed tells the kids to continue going, the kids feel a breeze inside the cave and follow it to an exit. That exit leads them to a bamboo forest, where they see Kleavor training. The Kleavor then challenges our heroes, so now it's time to battle. At first, the kids struggle to hit Kleavor from a distance as it's blocking everything. Then, when they move as a trio and attack from up close, Kleavor blocks everything again and counterattacks. However, the three starters are able to dodge. Dot says that they'll have to whittle it down little by little since it's so strong, so our heroes continue to attack it to do damage to it. Kleavor, after taking some damage, retreats deeper into the bamboo forest. As our heroes chase it, Dot comes up with a plan to attack it. Quaxwell and Crocalor will attack it from the floor, and Florigato from the air. However, when the Pokemon all attack inside the deeper forest, Kleavor is able to dodge all of them and cause all of them to land near each other, allowing it to attack all three of them with one mighty blow. As all three continue to struggle to try and hit it, they realize something. Kleavor is using sound and extra focus in order to dodge. The kids then try to run to a less dense part of the forest, but Kleavor uses Stone Edge and surrounds the entire area in massive rocks, preventing our heroes from running away. When Crocalor is readying up a flame charge, only 4 smaller pieces of bamboos on the floor to explode because of the heat, causing Kleavor to lose focus, Roy gets an idea. He has Crocolore use Flame Charge and become as hot as possible to run around near Kleavor. The heat from the Flame Charge is causing air trapped inside the bamboo to expand and cause the bamboo to explode and cause a massive pop. This is getting Kleavor distracted, and Florigato and Quaxwell are able to get solid hits in. However, Kleavor then leaps over them and over the rocks it created to get away from the dense part of the forest since the kids figured out a strategy. It then arrives in front of the entrance as Reed and Perrin also arrive there. As the kids and their Pokemon get ready to attack again, they are shocked when Kleavor uses its signature move, Stone Axe, which does massive damage to them. However, Liko realizes that it must be feeling cornered if it's using its best move, so she wants to continue to pressure it. And in order to do so, Liko terrestrializes her Florigato. Roy and Dot end up doing the same with Quaxwell and Crocolore. They then have the Pokemon use Flamethrower, Magical Leaf, and Liquidation to attack. When Kleavor stops them by using Stone Axe once again, the Pokemon power through, Magical Leaf blocking one of Kleavor's axe, Flamethrower blocking the other one, leaving it wide open, allowing a power boosted Liquidation from Quaxwell to do major damage on Kleavor. However, Kleavor is still able to use Stone Axe and damage all of the hero's Pokemon, ending the battle, as it's also exhausted. After it sees our heroes taking care of their Pokemon and everyone being healed up, it leads them to a cliff overlooking a gorgeous view of Oni Mountain. It then smashes a rock to bring out its ancient Pokeball. That's when we see the flashback. Sometime in the past, Lucius was protecting Kleavor from a bunch of villagers that had tools, as it was causing the villagers trouble. However, Lucius says that Kleavor isn't the only one at fault. He cuts the rope that's tying Kleavor's hands, but that leads to Kleavor attacking once again. Lucius's Lapras, however, comes out of the Pokeball to save him, and we see that that's where Lapras got its scar. Lucius then asks Kleavor if it would rather test its strength instead of causing trouble for the villagers, before telling it about him wanting to go to a paradise called Laqua. Kleavor decides to go with Lucius, and here we hear Lucius talk to someone named Ristle, but we don't see this person, and that's where Kleavor's flashback comes to an end. As everyone is reflecting on the flashback and what they saw, our heroes also question Ristle, but as they're doing so, Kleavor's Pokeball rolls towards Terrapagos, and it decides to go in. It looks like it decided to join our crew after all. As Reed said, it was waiting for someone it could trust. As our heroes are heading back to Masui Town, Perrin says that she has to leave, but that she's motivated to take more pictures than ever. She promises not to post the pictures of Terrapagos or Kleavor, and she looks forward to seeing our heroes when they've all changed. As they bid her farewell, our heroes head back to their own ship to debrief with the rest of the team. The next morning, as Liko's getting ready for the day, she hears a noise outside of her window. When she opens it, it's Liko's grandmother's Quackabilly. And that's where we end the episode. The battles in this episode are really interesting. We get different terrains for the different battles in this episode, which we haven't seen since like XY. It makes for a good action piece and set when battle locations change throughout the episode, allowing for variety. It's also interesting to watch the writers try to get the adults out of the way as much as possible so that they're not part of the battle. The kids are the only ones solving the entire 6-hero Pokemon situation and forcing them to battle. Because here, for example, I could imagine Captain Pikachu being the main focus of a battle with Kleavor if Reed had come along with the kids. And I'm glad the writers do realize what the most important parts of the stories here are to focus on. Character-wise, this arc finally feels like the one where all three of our heroes are finally part of the main cast. And we all know that Dot originally wasn't as important of a character, but I think fan reaction has allowed her to be way more involved in the story. As for Perrin, she was a fine companion character for these last 2 episodes. She helps provide some exposition, but for the most part, she seems to be someone who just allows our heroes to get the clues and motivation to get to Kleavor. The flashback, as I predicted about Kleavor, works not only as a backstory to Kleavor, but also it teases, in this case a someone, for the fans to speculate over and get their theories rolling. Is Ristle maybe the girl that we see in the intro to the show? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. An overall fun episode with some fun story and decent battle variety. With Liko's grandmother seemingly returning, I will be interested to see how she helps our heroes look for the Entei. I can't wait. Episode 74 of Pokemon Horizons titled The 3 Explorers just dropped. In this episode, it is an exposition heavy episode where we learn more about Lucius and his past. What do we learn? Let's talk about it. This episode continues from the last episode as Liko's grandmother returns to the Brave Olivine. After seeing all of the starters having evolved, she says that she has learned more about Lucius, but first, she wants to battle Liko. This battle is a showcase of Liko's development. The battle is really here to break up the episode so that it's not just all talking. and I appreciate that. Liko is able to dodge attacks and fire back with Magical Leaf and Acrobatics until eventually she gets hit by Flare Blitz. She's then able to use Sucker Punch to counter a second Flare Blitz. However, this is where we learn that Arcanine's ability is Justified. Justified being the ability where if a Pokemon is hit by a Dark type move, its attack increases. I feel like we knew that the Arcanine had Justified already? Maybe I could be mistaken. Either way, Liko counters with her Terrassalization, and she wins when she uses Magical Leaf on Arcanine's feet to get it to trip, and then use Magical Leaf close range. This battle highlights how much Liko's grown up through the Terrassal course and her adventures with her friend, showing the impact of her journey. We then go back to Olivine to get new bits of exposition to shore up some of the questions that I've had about the series in the past, as well as learn about some new stuff that's going to affect the future. Diana starts off by showing a picture of her when she was younger with Hamber. They used to adventure together. A year ago, Diana reunited with Hamber, who offered to support her on her adventure. However, she then soon found out that Hamber was actually targeting the pendant that she'd given to Liko, and some sort of unknown organization was involved. So, sensing the danger, Diana asked Luca, Liko's mom, for help to protect Liko. Luca then tasked the Rising Voltacklers to ensure that Liko was going to be able to safely make it back to Paldea. So that explains why the Voltacklers arrived and protected Liko in episode 1 the way they did. Then, when her castle was attacked, Hamber and his group identified themselves as the Explorers, and Diana was shocked to hear that term again, especially because the original Explorers were founded 100 years ago by Lucius. So there's this group using this name for some reason, and to understand why they might be using Lucius's team name and their true purpose, Diana began investigating the origins of the Explorer team. That's why she left the Brave Olivine a while back to dig deeper into the original Explorer's history. She traveled the world, but all she found were history books that had like fragmented traces. But then she decided to revisit the town where Lucius was said to have stayed. There she talked to someone who had lived there a long time, and this old lady showed her legends and diaries of people from the time, and she finally found records left by those who encountered Lucius who mentioned his companion. And we learned that the original Explorers consisted of 3 members: Lucius, Ristle, and Gibeon. If you remember last episode, our heroes heard the name Ristle in Memories of Cleavor. When trying to figure out Gibeon, Liko brings up that she's heard that name too. It's Amethio's grandfather, and Gibeon is also the leader of the Explorers. Remember, they had that conversation when they were trapped in the cave. But again, our heroes are trying to figure out if this is the actual Gibeon from the Explorers, who at this point would be over 100 years old, or is it just some other guy taking the name? Regardless, Diana shares one other major discovery. Gibeon is the chairman of Exceed Corporation, and Freed is shocked to hear about this because, as we know, he once worked as a researcher for the Exceed company. This is apparently a fact he hadn't mentioned to everyone before. While we, the audience, have known this, the fact that we're learning that either the rest of the Voltacklers or just the kids have not been told about this is a bit strange. Why is Freed hiding this? This is making me suspicious of Freed. Regardless, he says that he was secretly researching the Eternal Blessing, the Loquium, and we saw the effects of Loquium a while back when Spinel used it on his Umbreon. Freed claims that he didn't know that there was a chairman for Exceed. He thought the only person in charge was the president, Crave. Although then all of a sudden he remembers talks about higher-ups that Crave had. But using this knowledge, our heroes realized that Gibeon and the Explorers were using the Exceed Company to study this thing called Loquium as they're trying to go to Laqua, meaning they must be after Laqua's Loquium. Still, the questions remain about why Gibeon is still active and what he plans to do with Loquium. But our heroes do feel like they're closer to uncovering the truth. Freed is still curious about Ristle, and that's when Liko decides that she wants to go back to the Crystal Pool to once again try out the legend about being able to talk to deceased people, because she's seeing Terapagos' reaction to the name Ristle every time when they're having the conversation. At night, they head back there and pray for Ristle to arrive, and this time, the pond flashes a blinding light and a woman with blonde hair and a baby arrives in front of them. She seems to recognize the Terapagos and pet it, and she recognizes Lucius's Pokemon when they come out of the ancient Pokeball. Freed explains to her that they're trying to get Terapagos back to Laqua, and they're looking for the 6 hero Pokemon, and here we learn that Terapagos is Ristle's Pokemon, not Lucius. The baby that Ristle is holding is named Layla. That is Diana's mother's name, meaning that she's Liko's great-grandmother, which also means that Liko is a descendant of Lucius. What? And that's the revelation that ends the episode. Honestly, the show treats this revelation as this bombshell, but if you just look at Lucius, you can make the connection pretty easily. Was anyone actually shocked to learn this? I mean, I wasn't aware of any of this story, and just purely based off design, I made a video a while back saying that Lucius is Liko's grandfather. Now, I was wrong by several generations because at that point I didn't know how old Lucius was supposed to be, but regardless, even back when we practically knew nothing, I didn't think that was a wild leap to make. At least now the characters involved in the stories know, which is a major development because it's going to cause them to react and change in certain ways, and I'm looking forward to what that's going to be. The revelation also finally starts laying the ideas for the theme of Pokemon Horizons and explains why Amethio is one of the first people we meet in the series. While I don't know what the final theme of the story is going to end up being, it has something to do with family legacy, and Amethio contrasts Liko in a major way. Amethio is directly following orders from his grandfather to live up to the family legacy. He's trying to impress someone who he looks up to. Liko, on the other hand, chose her adventure without knowing the connection to her family at all. Her goals are independent of her family's legacy, and she just chose to take Terapagos back to Laqua, not to make anyone in her family happy, but because, in her mind, that was the right thing to do. It informs to us who Liko is at the core of her character. Liko is a selfless person, and while I wouldn't say Amethio is a selfish person, his goals are to directly help someone else's selfish desires, and that tells us that Amethio is someone who desires validation. And I'm sure that we're going to learn more about this as the series continues, but it's an interesting look at the two main rivals of the series and how they're connected and contrasted. The next episode, it seems like we'll learn more about Ristle and about the adventures with Lucius, and looks like we're going to get an awesome battle here. We'll see what Gibeon really wants. This might finally give us clarification on what Laqua is, what Laquarium does, and what our heroes are ultimately going to accomplish if they manage to take Terapagos back there. I am really curious to see if any of these will be answered or all of these will be answered, and what other questions might come up from this. I can't wait. Episode 75 of Pokemon Horizons, titled The Future We've Been Entrusted. The shine of this world just dropped, and in this episode, our heroes learn about Lucius and the history of Laqua, as well as capturing a legendary Pokemon. What is it? Let's talk about it. Even the show knew this was an important episode, because the show doesn't contain any eye catches. The episode begins with Liko asking Ristle about the explorers and Laqua, and we learn about how Ristle made Lucius. She had a Terapagos that she found in the Great Crater of Paldea that she was trying to protect from some people who wanted it. When she's cornered, that's when Lucius arrives with his Rayquaza and runs them off. Later, when they're talking at night, we learn that Lucius had read Heat's book, and he believed in Terapagos. This tells us the type of person Lucius is. He's an optimist who wants to believe in the fantastic. This explains why he's looking to go to Laqua, the Pokemon paradise. Lucius says that he wants to see the beauty of the world. He's an adventurer in the true sense of the word. The two decide to go on an adventure to find Laqua together. This adventure is the adventure where Lucius made friends with Pokemon like Arboliva, Galarian Moltres, Lapras, Kleavor, Entei, and Ristle says that he just loved Pokemon, which is why Pokemon were so attracted to him. One day when asking people in a bar about Laqua, they come across Gibeon, who also believes in the story of Laqua. When asked about why he wants to go, Gibeon says that if the legends are true, then Laqua holds something extraordinary and he wants to witness it. So, Lucius asks Gibeon to join them in their search for this place, and Gibeon agrees, since it would make it easier to find this place as a team. This is where they come up with the name The Explorers, as there were three people seeking the unknown. Eventually, they all do reach Laqua, and it's a paradise just like it was claimed. There are legendary Pokemon hanging out with regular Pokemon, and there seems to be enough for everyone. However, when going deeper in the area, they also find areas where the land is barren and desolate. Eventually, they discover glowing pink crystals, and this is Laquium. It seems that it emits powerful energies, and these crystals are the thing that's encouraging these surrounding plants to grow, and explains why Laqua is so abundant in resources. But the nearby area is also drained of light and desolate because of it. Lucius believes that this energy transcends the laws of nature and that they should just pretend they've never seen this. However, Gibeon can see how much an energy like this can transform the world. Ristle agrees with Lucius and says that they should just head back to base camp. But later, when it begins raining, they realize that Gibeon isn't with them, and a massive explosion where the crystal was earlier alerts them to him probably still being there. Lucius, Ristle rush to the site, and they find Gibeon with his Zygarde excavating the crystal. Lucius tries to get Gibeon to stop, but Gibeon says that he's doing what must be done to help transform humanity's future. And this is also where he seems to go crazy, claiming that he found Laqua. When he continues to have Zygarde dig, the crystal gets more and more unstable. The gas spreads across the area, and the plants nearby get bigger and break down. Then the Pokemon nearby are affected, and they attack our heroes from the rage from the gas. As the gas continues to spread, Lucius says that it could cover the whole world and destroy it. All of his Pokemon come out to help stop the crystal, but the crystal just keeps growing and growing. Even Rayquaza can't stop the crystal. While Gibeon is obsessed with this infinite power, even his own Pokemon Zygarde understands the risks of this and tries to stop it with its cores, going from 50% to 10% and sending its cores to cover the crystal. But that doesn't work either, and it grows more and more, creating a massive crack in the ground, which Gibeon falls through. Seeing Lucius's determination to stop this crystal, Ristle wants to help. Her Terapagos transforms into a Stellar form and creates a massive protective bubble around the crystal and surrounds Lucius's Pokemon with something similar and has them outside of the crystal. But Lucius himself is still inside of the bubble. Lucius thanks his Pokemon and urges Ristle to leave the situation to him, promising that he'll survive and reunite with them one day. Despite Ristle's protest that she wants to fight alongside him, Lucius insists that she escape, saying that she should protect their future. That future, I'm assuming, being the child that we learned that Ristle was bearing at the time. The crystal explodes inside the bubble, and Terapagos seemingly turns into the pendant that Liko had at the beginning of the series. We don't see much more of Laqua after this. Ristle says that she won't be telling her child about Lucius. She doesn't even want their adventures to be known so that further tragedies don't happen in Laqua. She just wants Layla, the kid that she's having, to grow up as healthy, and that's good enough for her. She planned on finding Lucius's Pokemon at some point, but she's content now knowing that these Pokemon are found by our heroes, and that these Pokemon still hold the promise that they made to Lucius. This is where Liko realizes that the memories she saw from the Pokemon are from Terapagos' point of view when it was with Ristle. Fried asks her if she remembers where Laqua is, but she says she doesn't because she got there with the help of Rayquaza and the other Pokemon, and on their way back she was rescued by a boat. She wonders what happened to Gibeon, but before Liko can tell her, she begins fading away. Ristle says that knowing that our heroes exist in the future Lucius protected makes her happy, and she tells Liko to take care of Terapagos because it's clear now Terapagos should be Liko's partner. As she fades away, Terapagos begins crying, and Liko comforts Terapagos. Fried hands her a Pokeball, and Liko officially captures Terapagos as her Pokemon. The next morning, Diana leaves, saying that now that she knows about her past, her adventures with the pendant are done, and that she's just going to adventure wherever her heart desires. She says that if our heroes ever need help though, she'll be back. After she leaves, Fried and the others try and figure out how they can get to Entei and Rayquaza to figure out what's happening in Laqua now. But while Fried himself doesn't know what to do next, he has an idea of who might. Back in Exceed HQ, we see Chalice and Spinel doing some more research on Loquium. Spinel says that he's keeping this from Hamber, but he's worried because they don't know the location of Amethio since his dismissal from the project. But even still, Spinel feels like he's gonna be the one to reach Laqua alongside Gibeon. And that's where we end the episode. This episode answers a lot of questions while still leaving a lot of mysteries. While we learn about the meeting of Ristle, Lucius, and Gibeon, we still don't know things like how Gibeon managed to survive the encounter, how he's managed to live this long. We also don't know if this means Lucius is still alive and he's also survived. It's a real question because he claims he would live, but did he? It's also interesting to see that Zygarde wanted to stop Gibeon's ambition, yet is still with him. What will that mean for the future? If Gibeon goes crazy again, is Zygarde going to try to stop him again? And what about Gibeon's side of this story? We learned a while back that Amethio's father did something to get the ire of Gibeon, and that he thought that Amethio was doing the same. So what happened here? I really hope we're able to learn about that because I would love to see the connection between the two stories of our heroes and our villain and trying to deal with the different family legacy, and all this is fascinating and I'm curious to see where the story is headed because once Liko reaches Laqua, then what? Is she just gonna stay there with the hero Pokemon forever? Will they destroy the crystals? Will the story pull in Ash Greninja and have Terapagos protect the area forever? I'm really curious because it seems like the encounter with Entei is happening really soon. Does that mean the series is coming to an end? Or is there gonna be another major event like the Terrastal course to delay getting to Laqua? I guess only time will tell. I'm really curious to find out. Episode 76 of Pokemon Horizons titled, Why Not? Sodayo just dropped, and in this episode, our heroes meet up with a former Rising Voltacular member to find out about Entei. What will they find out? Let's talk about it. After how serious the last episode was in tone, this one is a comedy in comparison. There are a ton of puns in this episode, all tied to its main focus character, Sodayo, a former member of the Rising Voltacular. His name is a pun that roughly translates to that's right or exactly, and his partner Pokemon is a Wynot, whose Japanese name Sonano is another pun that translates to is that so or really? It's a combination that makes for a fun dynamic. Sodayo confidently says things that you can't always tell are true or not, while his Wynot either questions it or backs him up. I don't speak Japanese, but I'm pretty sure that's the vibe they're going with here. Just from that alone, you can tell that this episode is going to be a much more lighthearted affair. We learned pretty early on that Free told the crew that they were going to ask him about Entei, but that Molly does not seem to like or trust Sodayo's words. This has a bit of mystery about why that might be the case and what could have happened in the past. We learned that one day he just kind of left the ship. Freed had planned to meet him near a savannah, but when they arrive there, he isn't there yet. So, while they wait, Liko, Roy, and Dot decide to explore the savannah to look for rare Pokemon. They don't see any Pokemon at the savannah first, but Dot's Quaxwell does find a nearby body of water. It looks like it's a place that used to be an oasis, though there's not much water left now. As our hero's Pokemon enjoy the water, a very angry Farigiraf all of a sudden starts charging towards them. They are forced to fight it off from a distance as it's incredibly fast. While the battle rages on, someone appears from the side watching our heroes and talking about how this is a good scoop. He questions what made the Farigiraf so angry and wonders if the savannah is cursed. Our heroes work together as a team to defeat the Farigiraf and send it packing. Afterwards, a man approaches them, clearly impressed by their work, and he claims that they must be the secret, rumored organization that battle Pokemon all over the world and plot to conquer it. When our heroes try to explain that's not true, he just says, "The truth is what you make it." As Freed arrives, we learn that this is Sodayo. Upon arriving at the ship, he enthusiastically greets everyone, and we learn that he's an energetic and eccentric character who loves telling exaggerated stories. He also calls himself a truth-seeking Pokemon journalist, and he travels the world tracking down Pokemon mysteries. However, when Molly arrives and sees him as he's about to talk about how she used to look like, she threatens to use Chansey's Pound to send him blasting off if he does. Sodayo has a habit of interrupting people's questions so he could dive into his own tales, and that's what he does with Freed at first. Molly, clearly annoyed by this, tells Liko not to bring out Terapagos in front of him because it could be a hassle. We learn from Dot that he writes for an occult magazine and has written stories before that Dot has read. He's written stories like The 100 Faces of Pikachu and Tracking Down a Legendary Pokemon. Even still though, this is an occult magazine, so they wonder how much they can trust it. However, he appears behind them as they're discussing this, saying, "Truth is what you make it." It seems Dot is a fan of his, and he's impressed by them, saying that he might write a story about them. But before the kids can ask him about Entei, the main thing that Freed wanted to meet him to talk about, they get distracted when he says that he will tell them stories about the old time with the Rising Voltaclers. He tells our heroes a story about Murdoch creating a legendary dessert that exploded in popularity, and how pastry chefs all around the world were desperate to get the recipe from him, but he never told anyone. But when our heroes ask Murdoch, he says that while he did make the dessert and it was popular in the ship, that's as far as the popularity went. He then tells them another story about Orla having created a ship so fast that it can go around the planet. Of course, that's not true either. And then we get a great gag. Sodayo claims Ludlow is a superhero. However, because of his previous 2 stories being fake, the one thing that we the audience do know is true gets immediately dismissed by our heroes outright. It's a funny moment that leads back to his catchphrase of, "The truth is what you make of it." Before he can tell a story about Molly, she arrives and interrupts him. He pulls out a photo of young Molly, however, but that gets him blasted off the ship by Molly's Chansey. As the kids check on him in the savannah where he landed, before they can ask him about Entei, 3 Farigiraf appear, visibly angry and charge towards them. Captain Pikachu takes them on at first, but when an Espathro suddenly joins the fray, the 2 species begin to turn their attention towards each other and begin going at it with their psychic moves. In fact, the power from the psychic moves are so strong that a massive rock falls off a cliff towards our heroes. But Molly's Chansey is able to destroy the rock before it can hurt the group. Dot realizes that the water nearby has something blocking it, so she asks Roy to have Crocolore destroy the blockage. After using Stomping Tantrum, the blockage explodes, causing a lot of blocked water to come out of the ground and fill the oasis back to its original size. That also causes the Pokemon to stop fighting. Turns out they were fighting a turf war over this area, and in this case, the water. And the reason that the Farigiraf was mad was that our heroes were in its territory. But now that the water is back, it looks like the turf war for everyone has been resolved. Before he leaves, the kid asks him if he's seen Entei, and he just answers pretty straightforwardly that he heard someone saw it in Olivine City. And that's it. No over-the-top answer, just straight up, which is a great juxtaposition and another joke about the type of person Sodayo is. As they're heading towards Johto, Liko asks Molly if they can trust the info that Sodayo gave our heroes, and Molly says not to worry because his Wynot approved of it, meaning he is telling the truth. Liko then remembers Wynot approving when Sodayo was talking about Molly in the past, so she asks about that, and Molly explains that when she was young, she didn't know much about the world, so she just believed everything he said, and kept trying to do all of these crazy wild things. But now, she realized that he was either teasing her or trying to teach her. It, I guess, really depends on her perspective. Like he says, the truth is what you make it. As Sodayo looks at the night sky, he says to the Rising Voltaclers, "Let's meet again," and his Wynot seemingly approves, meaning he might actually return in the future. Sodayo then posts about his interaction on the online version of the occult magazine, and Dot sees it. The article is about the mystery of the Savannah curse on the Farigiraf. He says that the true cause was an encounter with an Espathra, and that the clashing psychic power led to the Oasis expanding. He also introduces Liko, Roy, and Dot as key players in this event and describes all of them, saying Liko is a healing girl who could read the minds of Pokemon, Roy is a reckless boy commanding powerful Pokemon, and Dot is a genius girl with intelligence surpassing AI, and he wonders if the three's teamwork will eventually turn the world on its head. And our heroes are happy to hear that, and that's the end of the episode. I love the final bit of the gag here too. Even in the magazine when he's telling the story, he was basically telling the truth, but also not. Yes, the psychic clash did lead to Dot noticing the water blockage and fixing it, but the article frames it like it was the psychic power that did that. The entire episode's premise is the truth is what you make of it, which is a nice sentiment. It asks kids who are watching the show to be more open to things, while also trying to figure out the deeper meaning behind things. It's an episode that has a lot of charm and does a really good job to endear the viewers to everyone involved. I am curious to see how the English dub will translate this episode. If they do a straightforward translation, you're going to lose a lot of the charm and the subtle meaning behind the jokes. Again, it's not that big a deal in the grand scheme of things, but I do think trying to translate this will be a tough job for the English dub. As our heroes head to Johto, looks like we're finally getting more backstory on Ludlow. He's been a pretty mysterious character so far, so I can't wait to see where his story goes. Episode 77 of Pokemon Horizon is titled, Ludlow Returns to His Hometown just dropped, and in this episode, our heroes head to Olivine City to find information on Entei, Olivine City being Ludlow's hometown. What will they find out? Let's talk about it. This is one of those episodes where the premise of it isn't resolved until the final few minutes of the episode, similar to last episode, but the difference is that this time it's a character writing of one of our hero character instead of someone random. In this episode, our heroes arrive in Olivine City to ask the people around the city about if they've seen or heard of Entei. Instead, the episode turns into showing us Ludlow's past, and I like that. We see Olivine City as it used to be, how things have changed over time, sometimes for the good, like an empty lot turning into a bakery, and sometimes for the worst, like shops turning into empty lots. However, Ludlow knows that as people change, so do cities, so he doesn't seem too bothered by it. They ask around about Entei, but no one seems to have seen any. They eventually come across a man named Mamoru, cleaning a dock near a rental boat shop. When they approach him, however, the man runs back inside the building. Turns out he was watching an old action film of a guy fighting a Sharpedo, the action star's name being Ginjiro. And Ginjiro was a massive hit back in days. He was Olivine City's own superstar, and his Versus Sharpedo series was a massive hit. But after a while, he just disappeared. Those movies are seemingly referencing B-movies that become massive hits, and their plots don't seem to make sense after a while. Like, the closest comparison I can think of is probably the Halloween series, which started off like this serious horror and psychological film, but became more and more wacky and goofy as the sequels continued. We learned that Quagsire was also an important part of the behind-the-scenes member of Ginjiro's cast. We also learned some more things like Olivine City used to have a film studio, which is a bit of a fun lore. But none of that really compares to Roy realizing pretty early on that Ginjiro is just Mighty G, which means that these are actually movies starring young Ludlow. This is a brilliant backstory that explains the Mighty G persona while also showing that Ludlow is an active character. He could have lived his life as an actor and just be happy with that, but instead he wanted to see what the world had. He wanted to be part of adventures and mysteries bigger than himself, and it shows why he's such a wise character. When Roy tries showing Mamoru the photo of Mighty G, Mamoru refused to believe that this old hag could be the same hero that he knows. The other thing that happens in this episode is that Murdoch stays behind in the ship to make a special dish, but his day consists of chasing around the Tatsugiri, who are taking away his sushi bucket from him. Eventually, the Tatsugiri fall in the ocean and drift away, and Murdoch just decides to give up on trying to find them since he has to go make food. Ludlow's Quagsire, seeing this, chases after them. Mamoru then takes our heroes to a group of small islands surrounded by a whirlpool, because this is where those movies used to be recorded. However, while exploring, the trio of Tatsugiri from the Brave Olivine drift over to this area and get trapped in one of the whirlpools. Dot tries to save them with Quaxwell, but can't. Liko tries to save them with Florigato, but can't. Roy tries to save them with Kilowattrel, but can't. Mamoru's Wooper also goes in to try and save them, but gets trapped in the whirlpool too. Mamoru grabs Ludlow's leg and asks him to save Wooper, unaware that Ludlow is actually Mighty G. He holds on to Ludlow's leg, preventing him from becoming Mighty G. That is until Ludlow's Quagsire appears, distracting Mamoru, allowing Ludlow to slip away and turn into Mighty G. He uses Quagsire's Surf and Sharpedo's Whirlpool to save all the Pokemon, and Mamoru is thankful that Mighty G G saved his Wooper and realizes that he's been narrow-minded, not to see that times have changed, but Mighty G is still cool, even if it isn't the hero he remembers from the silver screen. They take a picture together, Mighty G leaves, and then afterwards, Lilo says that he can barely keep up this form for 3 minutes, which I feel like might be a setup for something in the future? Maybe I just watched too much My Hero Academia though. Either way, as everyone returns, they say that they didn't really find much info on Entei, but it's Mamoru, who tells them that one of his customers apparently saw one in a nearby island. So with that info in hand now, our heroes plan to go there. Our heroes head back to the Brave Olivine at night and see the food that Murdoch was making. It looks good, but he made it in a wash tub. That's because the sushi tub was being taken by Tatsugiri. The episode ends on a fun joke as Murdoch once again begins chasing them and Lidlo makes a pun-filled joke about it. This is just a fun episode for a backstory. It does technically advances the plot for those who really care about every episode only having to advance the plot, but this episode really isn't about that. It's about showing a fun backstory to one of the more low-key members of the Risingville Tacklers. It gives you some perspective on why Lidlo is the way he is, why he's so strong, and his philosophies on life itself. Lidlo's a really awesome character. This was a fun episode, and I really enjoyed it. Episode 78 of Pokemon Horizons titled A Fierce Fight Against Entei. The noble roar of flame just dropped, and in this episode, our heroes come across the Entei they got info on last episode. What's gonna happen here? Let's talk about it. This episode's a strange one to talk about. It's an episode that contains what feels like a massive fake out that we don't learn about till the very end, and I don't know how to feel about that. Our heroes go talk to the customer that Mamoru told them had seen the Entei, and after a bit more investigation, after he says that many people have seen them, they narrow down its location. A beached Huntail, which is a deep sea Pokemon usually, tips them off to the fact that it might be an underwater volcano that might be coming in soon, which is where Entei probably is. So, as they wait for it at nighttime, that's exactly what happens, as the underwater volcano erupts and our heroes arrive in a nearby island, where they see Entei. They try to talk to it at first, but it doesn't seem interested, so they begin to battle it to gain its respect to hopefully get to talk to it afterward. After some fighting where Entei shrugs off most of its attack and attacks with Sacred Fire as well as some supernatural powers, it seemingly gains enough respect to our heroes to listen to what they have to say. But this is where the fake out happens, because Terapagos doesn't resonate with it, none of the other 6 hero Pokemon even come out of their Pokeball, and that's because it turns out this is the wrong Entei. It seems that this Entei was just here because it's a new island that was forming, and we get to see it with its counterpart Raikou and Suicune, who stay nearby in the brand new island before leaving in the morning. So like I said, I don't know how to feel about that. It felt like 80% of the episode was almost wasted with a battle that doesn't turn out to do anything in the end. That's fine for the most part. I don't have any issues with that. Not every encounter has to lead to our heroes getting a new 6 hero Pokemon. But I do have a theory as to why this might be happening, which I'll touch on soon. The main important bits of this episode happen in the back half of this episode. After not seeing him for a long time, we finally see Amethio again. He is in the office of the president of the Exceed Company. He asks Crave about the Loquium since he can't seem to get access to the data on it, but Crave just tells him that Gibeon has it. When Amethio walks out, Spinel comes in and drops the bomb, that Amethio is Crave's son. Our heroes then also get a call from Briar, letting them know that she has heard that an Entei was spotted in Area 0. She shows our heroes the image of the combined Paradox Mons from the game, and she tells them that Gita should allow them to go. So, with our next location being set, our heroes are ready to head back to Paldea, and that's where we end this episode. So the theory that I was talking about earlier is that I think that recently, the animators and writers of the show were told that the next Pokemon mainline game might not come until 2026, for the 30th anniversary. So the writers would have realized that now they need to slow down the rate of the storytelling in order to facilitate this anime still being around. The last few episodes have been episodes where we get information about something, but the thing to advance the main plot doesn't really take place until the last few moments of the episode. The rest of the episode is either a character study or a battle, and it's fine for the episode, but it just doesn't make sense of how this show has typically been written. I feel like if the writers knew from the beginning that this show was going to be around for 4 years, then there's zero chance that they would have allowed our heroes to already capture 4 out of the 6 hero Pokemon this quickly. So I'm really interested to see if that is the case, how they'll slow down the rate of the story here. Is Rayquaza and Entei going to take a full year to capture? I'm really fascinated by this. In terms of the episode itself, I feel like this mislabeling of a Pokemon being a hero Pokemon should have happened earlier, right? It makes sense, especially for someone like Lapras, a more common Pokemon. Instead, I do find it strange that they did this with Entei. It feels like the Gamefreak developers came up and said, hey, none of your hero Pokemon have anything to do with Scarlet and Violet, and that's what the anime is supposed to be promoting. So this is where the writers have had to make a change in the story that they originally had planned and turn Entei into Gouging Fire. This makes her a bit of a weird flashback, because the flashback that we saw when Ristle told her story was an Entei. Now, if you saw the anime Pokemon 2025 trailer, then you know that this is what Area Zero looks like. So Entei was definitely caught in Area Zero, but it just doesn't make sense that the flashback has Entei, but it really ends up being Gouging Fire. There's going to be some explanation of how it was always Gouging Fire and people just had it wrong, or Area Zero caused it to turn into a Gouging Fire. Either way, it feels like a late, awkward shift, and it really pops up in the writing. At least finally our heroes are going to Area Zero. That was at least set up a while back, so I'm glad to see that paying off and them coming back to the story thread. It seems like our heroes will have to prove themselves against Geeta in order to be allowed to go to Area Zero. And because of that, the next episode is a battle-focused episode where our heroes take on the Pokemon League. Except, I don't think they're taking on the whole league, I think it's just Geeta. Either way, I am really fascinated to see how the battle is going to go. It'll be fun to watch some Gen 9 related stuff. Hopefully, it's done really well. Episode 79 of Pokemon Horizons titled Over the Top just dropped. In this episode, our heroes take on Geeta in order to be allowed to go to Area Zero. How will the battle be? Let's talk about it. Our heroes go to the Pokemon League to ask permission to go to Area Zero. At first, Geeta only gives free permission, but after a bit of back and forth with the kids, she agrees to allow them on the condition that they can defeat her in battle. It's a 3-on-3 matchup where Geeta uses 2 Glamet and a Glamora, while our heroes use their partner Pokemon. As the battle starts, the battle is strategic on both sides. Roy tries to use Stomping Tantrum from the start, but Geeta's 2 Glamets use Rock Polish to gain significant speed and are able to dodge. Seeing this trio of rock Pokemon, Liko says that they can't win by fighting one-on-one, so instead they'll have to focus on one at a time. So they go after Glamora first, with their Pokemon's ranged moves, but Geeta has Glamora use Dazzling Gleam to deflect their moves and blind the opposing Pokemon. She then has Glamet attack from above using Power Gem. In order to battle through Dazzling Gleam's light, Roy has Crocalor use Disarming Voice on the Glamets to stop them from moving, while Liko and Dot go after Glamora. Dot has Quaxwell use Liquidation, but Geeta counters by having Glamora use Spiky Shield. Then Liko has Florigato go towards Glamora and counter another Dazzling Gleam with Sucker Punch. That works and they get in a great hit, however Glamora's ability Toxic Debris activates, laying down a Toxic Spike and poisoning all of our heroes' Pokemon. Our heroes are in a bad position now. Toxic Spike is making it hard to move, long-range attacks can be countered by Glamora's Dazzling Gleam and the Glamets, while close-range moves can be stopped by Spiky Shield. And now, because they're poisoned, they're also being hit by Glamet's Venoshock, which is doing twice as much damage. Roy decides that they need to do something different, so instead, they will do what Cleavor did back in the Bamboo Forest and use Sound to attack. And that's exactly what they do, as another Dazzling Gleam Power Gem combo is used by Geeta. This time, Liko uses Sound to have Florigato dodge the moves, then has it use her Flowering Buds to catch the 2 Glamets in the air. Roy then has Crocalor use Stomping Tantrum to do massive damage to both of them. But Geeta once again has a plan, as since the 2 Glamets are super weak now, she has them use Memento before they go out. And that's exactly what they do, as Quaxwell and Crocalor are hit with the move that lowers their attack and special attack harshly. Since they have no real attacking power now, Liko tries to come up with a strategy to beat Geeta, cause she knows that they can't rely on getting critical hits. She gets an idea, seeing Geeta sacrifice her Glamet, she has Roy and Dot go to attack, but when Geeta has Glamora use Spiky Shield to block their attack, Liko instead has Florigato use Sucker Punch on Crocalor, stopping him from attacking, and in doing so, she has Roy use Stomping Tantrum once again. The reason? Since the previous move failed, the power of Stomping Tantrum is doubled, and since Glamora is 4 times weak to it, that does massive damage to Glamora. Geeta is impressed with our hero's ingenuity, but she wants to go all out on offense and decides to Terrasilize. Our heroes decide to Terrasilize too, as they know that Florigato is their only real hope to do enough damage to win. However, when Liko tries to attack, Poison prevents Florigato from attacking, so Geeta has Glamora attack first with Terra Blast. Both Crocalor and Quaxwell get in front of Florigato to try and block it, but with their attacks both down, it doesn't work, and the 2 Pokemon are KO'd. However, it seemingly blocks enough damage as Florigato is able to hang on. And since it's so heavily damaged now, Overgrow also activates. So, with the power of both Terra and Overgrow, Liko is able to use one final full blast of Magical Leaf, and that overpowers a second Terra Blast from Glamora, KOing it, which means the winner are our heroes. Since they were able to win, Geeta allows our heroes to go to the Great Crater of Paldea, saying that they are powerful enough to take on the powerful Pokemon of Area Zero. Penny then takes them to the Area Zero gate, and our heroes head off. Meanwhile in the air, Hamber's telling both Coral and Sidian that since the Rising Volt Tacklers are going to Area Zero, the two need to go in and do a recon mission on them to find out what they're doing. He doesn't want them engaging with them, so with that, they also head to Area Zero. And that's where we end this episode. Overall, a fun, battle-focused episode that really helps show off our hero's strength while also giving us some clarity on the story. What I mean by that? Well, this episode fully crystallizes that the anime takes place after the events of the game. According to Gita, the accident in Area Zero, aka the AI professor and the other Koraidon or Miraidon issue, has been resolved. They also know about Paradox Pokemon, which wouldn't have been a thing prior to the events of the game. My only real issue with this episode are two things. First, the audio mixing in this episode felt terrible. I don't know if it was just my headphones or what, but some of the audio mixing in here is really bad. And second, the first 5 minutes of this episode are just recap. That's fine right now, since this episode aired after a 2-week break. They probably just want to remind everyone at home what the story has been so far and what their plans are moving forward. But when this episode comes out to streaming in America or on TV in any other nation where this show doesn't go on break, it's just going to feel like a massive filler in the beginning of the episode. People are having a real issue with Gita losing, saying, how could a champion lose? But are people actually listening to this episode? It's said in the episode itself. Gita could have easily won this battle after poisoning our hero's Pokemon by switching to more defensive tactics, stalling them out and easily win that way. But as Rika says, she doesn't want to do that in this case, which is why she went on the full-on offensive with Terra. If this was more of a battle of attrition, like maybe a champion battle, I could easily see her using stall tactics in order to win. This is a battle where instead, she's just trying to test if our heroes are strong enough to go to Area Zero. So no, Gita isn't super weak, and yes, she wasn't trying hard. I know that sounds like a cop-out, but the episode spells that out. I don't know what else I could say about that. And I know a lot of people have issues with that, but I really don't. I am fascinated by this Coral and Sidian dynamic that's going to be used in Area Zero. It looks like Coral might even capture a Screamtail here, which would be crazy, but it also makes me wonder if any of our other heroes will capture a Paradox Pokemon. I'm fascinated to see how it all pans out. I can't wait. Episode 80 of Pokemon Horizons, titled Totally Awesome Pokemon in Area Zero, just dropped. In this episode, our heroes head down to Area Zero while Coral and Sidian follow them. What's gonna happen here? Let's talk about it. This episode's a really fun episode. The episode establishes a few things that refer to the universe, and I'll get to that, while giving one of the villains a brand new Pokemon, a rare sight in this series. In fact, this episode feels closer to the Team Rocket episodes of old, and Coral and Sidian feel closer to Team Rocket in the way that they're being used here currently than at any point prior in the series. Our heroes head down to the crater of Paldea and see this beautiful land, clouds high in the sky with Pokemon flying around, lush green grass all over with giant Pokemon. As the kids are walking around there, they talk about hoping to come across some Paradox Pokemon. Meanwhile, Coral and Sidian are watching them from a distance, but Coral is being carefree in her approach of doing so. Our heroes get to the top research lab and meet up with Briar. There, she once again shows our heroes the drawn paradoxes from the books, as well as the video that shows the potential Entei that's going to be here. However, that area is way lower down, so she says she'll lead them there. As our heroes head down the cliff, they talk about the Terra Crystals and how they're all over the lower area of Area Zero. As the adults walk ahead, we hear a conversation starting about how the Paradox Pokemon came to be, but we don't get to hear it fully. To me, the most interesting part of this is that Briar says that there are both ancient and future Paradox Pokemon, and this changes things for me. So far, this series has been all Scarlet. The school is Narana Academy, the mons that we see in Area Zero from this episode and future episodes seemingly are all past paradoxes. But here, she's saying that both future and past Paradox Pokemon exist. This to me brings up so many questions that I don't think they meant to create with this one line. I think they probably just wanted to explain the Paradox Pokemon as a mechanic to the audience and said the line without really thinking through the implications. Because if both past and future Paradox Pokemon exist, then who was the professor for Area Zero? I always assumed it was Sada, but was Turo also involved? Does that mean that there was both an AI Sada and an AI Turo? So many questions come up from that line. Regardless, as the kids are walking along talking, Crocolore hears something, and this eventually leads to Roy separating from Liko and Dot and coming across Sandy Shocks. He doesn't realize it's a Sandy Shocks, of course, but he's chased the other way by it, and as he is, he runs right by Coral and Sidian, who hide when he comes nearby. Coral, seeing this as way more fun than just following our heroes, flies over to the area that Roy went. She loses him, but she comes across a Screamtail here when she accidentally steps on his tail. Of course, she thinks it's just a Jigglypuff, and the two have a back and forth, arguing with each other and clowning each other. That is until a great tussle Tusk appears. The Great Tusk is annoyed at them and starts batting them away, and this eventually leads to Coral battling the Great Tusk with her Glalie alongside Screamtail. The battle itself isn't the focus, it's the characterization of Coral and the Screamtail. Coral is carefree in almost all aspects. She takes the Great Tusk head on with Glalie and puts up a pretty good fight against it, showing that she's also pretty strong. Meanwhile, Screamtail loses its voice seemingly when it is scared. There's some really fun interaction here that I honestly think you just need to watch the episode to appreciate, but it eventually culminates in Screamtail screaming as Glalie uses self-destruct, causing everyone to go down. Meanwhile, Roy eventually stops being chased by the Sandy Shocks and turns around to battle it. I don't think he ever does realize that it's a ground-type Pokemon, but it doesn't matter, as speeding up with Flame Charge and using a powerful flamethrower is enough to KO Sandy Shocks. He then thanks Sandy Shocks for the battle and walks back to his group with his Crocalor while singing. As he leaves, the Sandy Shocks also start singing a song as well. So could Sandy Shocks eventually end up in the hands of Roy? I wonder. What we don't have to wonder about, however, is that eventually everything is settled down where Coral battled, and it looks like the Great Tusk ran away after the battle with Coral. Coral says that Screamtail is alright, but when it starts screaming at her for not understanding it when she tries to talk to it, Coral throws the nearest thing at it, which happens to be a Pokeball, and captures it. Yeah, Coral captures a Paradox Pokemon. Later, she holds down Screamtail's mouth and asks Sidian, where in the world did he go? That's pretty funny. Eventually, Roy meets back up with Liko and Dot, who were worried about where he went and were about to go looking for him. He tells them that he faced off against a Magneton with hair, which they imagine, which is also pretty funny. They then decide to sleep in a nearby cave for the night. After they eat, Briar tells them that she's gonna go to sleep early, telling them that they should also be prepared tomorrow as they never know what can happen in the place where Entei was spotted. As she goes to sleep, our heroes hear a Screamtail screaming and wailing, which sends shivers down their spine, and that is the end of the episode. This is just a fun overall episode. Like I said earlier, it does make me question the chronology of events that took place in Area Zero in the anime, as it seems Briar actually doesn't know what caused the Pokemon to arrive either. Either way, I'm glad we get to see some Paradoxmons and their personality. We get to see our heroes and the villains separately face off against their own issues, and the villains got a new team member, which seems like it's gonna be a comedic relief type Pokemon. The episode gave more to Coral's character as this carefree, powerful trainer, and the dynamic between the straight-laced Sidian and the opposite of that in Coral really shined. Overall, a really fun episode that I'd say is one to check out for sure. Episode 81 of Pokemon Horizon is titled A Grand Battle. Earth Gouging Fire just dropped, and in this episode, our heroes come across and battle Gouging Fire to try to join their quest to help Terrapagos. Will they be successful? Let's talk about it. After last episode, as our heroes arrive the next morning to the place where Entei was spotted in the camera, they sit down there for a bit to begin discussing their plans. We see that Sidian and Coral are still observing them from a distance and have not been caught. Coral is still bored. However, her Screamtail comes out and begins screaming, so as she deals with that, a massive shadow flies over them. The Pokemon that our heroes are looking for, this Entei-looking Pokemon, arrives in front of them. And this time, they are sure that this is the Pokemon they are looking for, as Terrapagos resonates with it. The other hero Pokemon also come out of their Pokeball to tell Liko that it's up to her, so she goes to this Pokemon and asks it to join them. It seems like it's willing to, as it gives up its ancient Pokeball very easily to Liko. However, things aren't always that easy, as it takes the remaining hero Pokemon belt and puts it inside of its fur, as it challenges our heroes to come get it in order to earn its respect. This Entei-looking thing at first protects itself with Burning Bulwark, which prevents our heroes from attacking close range without being burned. Dot realizes that the move must take a lot of stamina and that they should use ranged move until the move runs out. Then they can have Captain Pikachu use Thunder Punch. They try that strategy to hit it from range and dodge around for a while as Burning Bulwark stops. Then Captain Pikachu does indeed use Thunder Punch, but it seemingly does nothing. Then it fires back with a Dragon Pulse. As she was watching the battle from a distance, Briar and Dot also come to the same conclusion. This is not an Entei. In fact, this is a Paradox Pokemon. And later in the episode, they figure out that it's called Gouging Fire. It's a Fire and Dragon type. Briar also explains that the research behind Paradox Pokemon are pretty new, so she could see why Lucius might have mistaken this thing for an Entei back in the days. I have a small issue with this explanation, but we'll get to that later. Since its typing is different than they thought, that means that their only super effective move against it is Stomping Tantrum. However, Dot thinks that that shouldn't make a difference in their strategy, as they can hit from a distance and then attack using Stomping Tantrum. But when they do it this time, Gouging Fire just brushes off the attacks. So seeing that their moves are weak, Dot gets an idea. She has Quaxwell jump into the water and spray with Air Cutter, but since Quaxwell is doing it in the water, Air Cutter turns into Aqua Cutter. Aqua Cutter has a lot more chance of landing critical hits, and it seemingly does as Gouging Fire gets frustrated and starts using Burning Bulwark for defense once again. But while it's going after our Florigato, Pikachu, and Quaxwell, Crocalor is on the side preparing a Stomping Tantrum. And since so far its moves haven't done enough, its frustration is building, meaning that a Stomping Tantrum will do way more damage. So, as soon as Burning Bulwark goes away, Dot has Crocalor send out a massive Stomping Tantrum that seemingly does massive damage. However, just then, Gouging Fire fires a Dragon Pulse from the sky to clear the clouds for sunlight in order to activate photosynthesis. Once it does, it uses Raging Fury, which looks incredible. It does massive damage to all of the Pokemon, and even Cap is put in a bad position and has to be saved by Crocalor. But while this is going on, Dot is getting more and more excited, claiming that the battle is fun as they're figuring out how to counter and they will beat Gouging Fire. However, they notice that Raging Fury does have a side effect of confusion, and Gouging Fire hurts itself for a bit until it snaps back. So seeing this, Free tells Dot to make the plans, and she comes up with a different plan this time than just relying on Stomping Tantrum. She has everyone terrestrialize and attack from a distance while dodging Raging Fury from Gouging Fire. As Raging Fury is getting close to being done, she then has her terrestrialized Quaxwell use Aqua Cutter to cause Gouging Fire to chase it into the water. As the Raging Fire finishes off in the water and Gouging Fire is wet and confused, then Cap attacks from top with Thunder Punch, which does extra massive damage now that Gouging Fire is wet. Liko's belt with all the ancient Pokeball flies out of it, and Liko has Florigato catch it with its bud, and that's it. Now that they've gotten the belt, the battle is over. As Liko asks it to join them, Terapagos arrives, and Gouging Fire shows our heroes its memories of Lucius from Terapagos' perspective. It's of Lucius riding around on Gouging Fire thinking it's Entei, and he's eventually able to lay on top of it, which seemingly means he has made Gouging Fire comfortable enough around him. He then calls back his Gouging Fire as they seemingly are friends now, and he tells Ristle that now he's ready to head to Laqua. While they were able to see everything else, this is the one thing that the explorers can't see as they aren't inside the pink circular bubble thing. Eventually, Gouging Fire goes back in its ball. That means all that's left is Rayquaza. However, just then, the sky clears. A loud noise, and from the sky comes down to Area 0 Rayquaza, as all of the other hero Pokemon also come out of their Pokeball. That is the end of the episode. So going back to what I talked about in the episode itself, but my only small problem with the bit of change about this Gouging Fire to Entei thing is that apparently Lucius knew enough what a Entei was that he knew that Gouging Fire looked similar, and that presumably means he also knew that Entei was a fire type. I mean, obviously, right? Entei has been a legendary for a long period of time. The Tale of Ho-Oh spans a long time ago, and Lucius is not that long ago. So it's not a new legendary, but it didn't look different enough or use enough weird moves for both Ristle and Lucius to not even realize that this is a completely different Pokemon? I don't buy it. That's the only real thing. Besides that, I really like this episode. The battle was very strategy focused, and since last episode's battle was Roy focused, this episode the battle was Dot focused, meaning next episode it'll probably be Liko focused. It seems like the writers want to balance out all three trios battling focus episodes. I didn't expect Rayquaza to appear this soon after capturing the 5th hero, but narratively it acts similar to like a boss fight in a video game, so it makes sense. I'm just really curious to see where they manage to go after this. I feel like the show is about to come to a major turning point. I don't know what it's gonna be, but I really am curious. To put it into perspective, episode 81 was in the original Kanto anime when Ash lost in the league, the second to last episode. So next episode feels like a major episode that this episode helps set up. I'm not sure what's going to happen in the story next, but I am eager to find out. Episode 82 of Pokemon Horizons titled At the End of the Shining Rainbow just dropped, and in this episode, our heroes take on Rayquaza to earn its respect. Will they be successful? Let's find out. This episode is battle focused, and our heroes take on Rayquaza with all of their available Pokemon, even after not having their full strength after battling last episode. And the battle we get here is really good. They figure out pretty quickly that the reason Rayquaza is here is that all of the other hero Pokemon were gathered. However, since they've already fought and used their Terror Orb, Freed decides that he's going to help them too, along with his Charizard and Captain Pikachu. We get multiple strategies in this battle. First one is our heroes using the Area 0 terrain to their advantage. Freed distracts Rayquaza by having him chase him while dodging its moves, and then eventually our heroes from different elevations attack. Dot especially gets a really nice hit in with Quaxwell and Tinkaton. They then continue to attack with Air Slash from Freed's Charizard, Acrobatics from Florigato, and Flamethrower from Quaxwell. Rayquaza responds with a Draco Meteor to everyone. Luckily, everyone manages to dodge it. But it's still super high in the air and it's hard for our heroes to attack. That's when Dot calls the group with a second strategy. She wants to use the Soak strategy that they used against Gouging Fire last episode. She has a plan to break the rocks near the top of a hill that has waterfalls to send the water rushing, and in order to do that, Freed's Charizard and Roy's Crocolore, who is flying on Kilowattrel, use multiple bursts of Flamethrower to send Rayquaza near that waterfall. Then, Dot and Liko have their Pokemon destroy the rock, blocking the flow of water, which rushes in and covers Rayquaza. Captain Pikachu then follows that up with Volt Tackle to do major damage to Rayquaza. But just then, Rayquaza responds with a Dragon Tail of its own, which KOs Freed's Charizard and sends Pikachu flying. While Roy and Kilowattrel go rescue Captain Pikachu, Rayquaza then gets a direct hit in with Dragon Pulse on Dot's Pokemon, KOing both of them. Another Draco Meteor from Rayquaza, but Liko and Roy manage to both have their Pokemons dodge it. Liko even stops some of them with Hatchram's Confusion. She then has Florigato use Magical Leaf to cover Rayquaza's eyes so Roy can get Kilowattrel and Crocolore to attack him from behind. Kilowattrel gets a solid hit in from Spark, and Crocolore manages to get on top of Rayquaza. It uses Disarming Voice very close range and is super effective. Rayquaza once again uses Draco Meteor and our heroes get ready to dodge, but this time Rayquaza uses its tails to send the Draco Meteor's meteor flying directly towards their Pokemon, especially Hatchram, Kilowattrel, and Florigato, which KOs all three of them. The final meteor is sent towards Terrapagos, which is destroyed by Cap. Cap then uses Rising Volt Tackle and sends Rayquaza flying in the sky. However, Rayquaza comes flying back down with Dragon Ascent to KO Cap, meaning now the only Pokemon left is Roy's Crocolore. As Roy's continuing to try and battle, Liko wishes and wants to still continue to battle Rayquaza, and that feeling seemingly reaches Terrapagos as it jumps down as Liko's Pokemon and transform, ready to battle to help her out. Liko looks at Terrapagos' moves in the Pokedex before having it use Ancient Power, and that seems to do major damage to Rayquaza. Crocolore then blocks Dragon Tail using Disarming Voice, and Liko has Terrapagos block Rayquaza's Dragon Pulse with Protect. Rayquaza then fires another Draco Meteor and sends it flying with its tail, but both Terrapagos and Crocolore counter. However, the two Pokemon still get hit by it, but the two aren't down yet. And by the way, this shows really how tough Crocolore is compared to the other partner Pokemon, because the other two got one shot by Rayquaza, and Crocolore manages to take a hit of Draco Meteor. Dot then tells Liko and Roy to keep going, as the damage is visibly showing in Rayquaza, and Freed says that the end of the battle is coming soon. Rayquaza then uses Dragon Ascent to go high in the air and fly down, and Liko has Terrapagos counter with Terra Starstorm. That does a massive amount to Rayquaza, and Rayquaza also gets a direct hit on Terrapagos with Dragon Ascent. Both Pokemon go flying backward, Rayquaza especially as it gets stuck in the rocky terrain. Terrapagos then gives its Terra energy to restore Crocolore's Terrastal, and with that, Roy has Crocolore do one final attack with a Terra boosted Flame Charge. This does a lot of damage to Rayquaza, and when Roy throws out Rayquaza's Ancient Pokeball, he captures it, which means the battle is over. Rayquaza then comes out of its Pokeball and it sends an orb that restores Terrapagos' Terrastal energy, allowing it to transform once again. Terrapagos then shows us the memory of the first time Lucius, Bristol, and Gibeon reached Laqua, and we then see all the hero Pokemon together talking. Liko sees that Rayquaza really wanted to reunite with the hero Pokemon to fulfill its promise to Lucius. All that's left now is going to Laqua. So Freed wants to have a meeting inside the Brave Olivine to discuss strategy before they do so. Roy tries to call back Rayquaza into his ball, but it doesn't return. Freed has to remind him that Rayquaza is Lucius' Pokemon, and that Rayquaza hasn't become Roy's partner yet. However, while Roy is bummed, Roy is happy that he got a little bit of Rayquaza's respect enough to stay in the ball, and says that he'll do his best to one day truly become his partner. Terrapagos then goes on top of Rayquaza's head, all the other hero Pokemon go back to their Pokeball, and they're ready to head off to Laqua. Our heroes thank Briar, who says that she'll write a great book about Terrapagos, and as our heroes head off, Coral and Sidian also head off to take what they saw back to Gibeon. Inside of Liko's house, we see that she sent an email to her parents explaining that she's headed to Laqua. A loud roar from Rayquaza, and her parents head out to see Rayquaza and the Brave Olivine heading off. Roy sends an email to his grandfather explaining how he managed to earn Black Rayquaza's respect and hopes to come back stronger, and Dot sends one to her mom talking about how she's discovered so many exciting things after adventuring with her friends and how she's having a great time. Then our heroes all follow Rayquaza and Terapagos as the second opening theme from the show plays, and as our heroes reach Laqua, that is the end of the episode. This is a really fun episode. Some people are upset that Roy was able to capture Rayquaza, but similar to the Gita thing, people just ignore context here. The battle against Rayquaza was a giant group effort, including getting help from another legendary Pokemon. Just because Roy got the final hit and enough respect from Rayquaza to stay in the ball, that doesn't mean he single-handedly beat Rayquaza and captured it. I'm shutting that notion down right now. The battles we get here are really fun with tons of teamwork, which are my favorite ones. I'd always wondered how they were ever going to make Roy's goal of battling Rayquaza a satisfying one. It kind of felt like Go's goal of catching Mew, which never seemed realistic. However, here, they technically fulfilled his goal while still keeping the main plot intact and moving. I do wonder what this means for his goals moving forward. Now that his primary goal from the beginning of the series has been accomplished, now what? His secondary goal is just to continue to gain respect from Rayquaza, but that's a thing that happens over the long term, right? That's not an immediate goal that can really be reached. And the same goes for Liko. Her original goal was to help Terapagos go back to Laqua, and now that all 6 hero Pokemon have been captured and Rayquaza has taken them to Laqua, now what? I know the goal is probably going to be to try to stop the pink crystal that Ristal told them about, but that's an everyone goal. Everyone's going to try to stop the thing that can potentially destroy the world. But does this mean the end of our heroes' individual goals? And does that mean we're close to the end of the series? Because you don't end your heroes' individual goals unless that's also the case. Or does this mean we might come across some major, massive change like a time skip or something like that that's going to allow our heroes to have new goals for each of their individual characters? The use of showing everyone's parents as our heroes head to Laqua especially made it feel like a season finale even though it's not. So whatever is happening next is going to be very different from what we have now. And I'm really fascinated to see where this goes because truly, I have no clue how the show is going to progress and I am eager to find out. Episode 83 of Pokemon Horizon is titled The Truth Revealed, a Meteor's Resolve just dropped, and in this episode we learn more about the villain side of the story regarding Laqua and their goals surrounding it. There's a lot to talk about here, so let's get to it. I'm just recovering from a sickness, so if my voice sounds nasally, that's why. Sorry about that. Sidian starts the episode by telling the rest of the explorers what they saw over the last few episodes following our heroes in Area Zero. Now that they have Rayquaza, the rest of the 6 heroes, and Terapagos has his power back, they're headed to Laqua. This means that the explorers will also be heading there soon to ambush them. It seems Gibeon specifically trusts Spinel the most, as he says they'll need his intellect, and Spinel in kind responds by saying he wants to show his devotion to Gibeon. There even is a conversation between the 4 on the continuing absence of a Meteo. Sidian thinks it would be useful to have him in the mission as firepower, but Spinel reminds him that he got suspended from missions. He also thinks 4 will be more than powerful enough. And as all of this is happening, we keep cutting back to Hamber with a suspicious eye towards Spinel. Meanwhile, Ameteo, along with Onia and Zerk, are undercover at Exceed Company, heading to Spinel's lab in order to figure out what he is plotting. We learn a few things here. First, the Locrium that we saw Spinel use on his Umbreon was a beta version, meaning it wasn't a completed thing. Ameteo wonders why Spinel would research this before coming across something called a Locrium Sphere. However, before we learn more about it, security guards arrive and take them away to a warehouse by the docks. Here, Ameteo comes to the conclusion that his father and the company don't know about this because Spinel has paid off these security guards. That's why the security guard brought them here to the warehouse, to make sure that this didn't become a big thing. And almost just as quickly, the doors open back up to reveal Hamber with everyone's Pokemon in hand. He came here because just like Ameteo, he suspected Spinel is up to something. And now, both have come to the same conclusion. Spinel is about to betray Gibeon. Ameteo wants Hamber to explain everything to him about Loquium and what happened between his grandfather and Lucius because he wants to help his grandfather. He wants to learn everything in order to figure out who he is and what he must do. So, Hamber obliges. While that's taking place, Spinel and Calus arrive at Gibeon's place and it seems they're ready to get back to Laqua. For the Voltaclers, this episode is mainly just following Rayquaza. However, we do get a more scientific explanation of what Locrium actually does. It begins when Freed wonders why it was called the Eternal Blessings Project. Molly surmises that it might be something that forcefully activates the cell in your body. More specifically, she used the example of someone getting cuts and then your body activating cells in order to repair that damage. She hypothesizes that maybe Locrium can continually give you a strong, fresh body by forcibly activating all the replacement cells. And that would explain the plants in the area dying because plants can't handle that process nearly as well as humans and Pokemon can. And that leads them to the conclusion that this is the same Gibeon from Lucius and Ristal's story. He is Ameteo's grandfather and he is fully alive, thanks most likely to a combination of technology from the Exceed Company and Laqueum. After guessing that the explorers are going after Laqueum because their current supply might be running out, they wonder if Laqueum is even in Laqua. After all, from what Ristle told them, it was sealed by Terrapagos, and if it's still there, how dangerous is it? All of this has the adults stressed, but the kids are just excited to get there and see what it's like, and this seems to ease the tension. The Voltaclers know there will be danger, but like always, they'll work together and figure it out, and that to them is motivating. When Zirconia also arrive alongside Amitheo's mansion, we see and learn a few things. First, Amitheo's crazy rich. Second, we see what his mother looked like. However, we also learn just as quickly that she died in a car accident when he was young. So he was basically raised by Hamber. Once some snacks are handed out, Hamber begins explaining everything. It's interesting what the show is doing here. We've seen Ristle's perspective, and we take her side to be generally the truth. However, here, everything Hamber explains is from Gibeon's side, so it's interesting to see a different perspective, regardless of if it's true or not. From Gibeon's perspective, Lucius didn't understand the value of Laqueum and was opposed to its use even without knowing of Gibeon's plan. And as for why Zygarde tried to stop Laqueum, it was because of Lucius's black Rayquaza. He betrayed Gibeon. That day he lost a friend and a bunch of Zygarde cells. What an incredible twist from Gibeon. We also see here that Hamber has a Zygarde cell that grew attached to him that he keeps with him. Gibeon also says he was caught in Laqua's collapse and his life was in danger, but saved by the Laqueum. And here we get Gibeon's explanation of what Laqueum is. For Pokemon, it can draw out the latent potential of a Pokemon and maybe a source of life, and depending on its application, it can maintain a person's youth for an extended period of time, which is how he's kept himself alive. With his heart broken after being betrayed by his friends, he retrieved a small sample of Laqueum and fled Laqua. He invested in the future of Pokemon, he founded the Exceed Company, continually researched Laqueum, and carried the name of the explorers and endured 100 years of loneliness. Oh, poor Gibeon. We also learn here that Hamber started working for Gibeon because when he was young and didn't know what he was doing, Gibeon helped guide him. We don't really get an explanation of what that is, besides this purple napkin, but his noble goal of eternal prosperity for Pokemon and people left an impression on him, which is why he became the teacher for the other explorers. He taught Coral, Sidian, and Chalice, the only exception being Spinel. Spinel was actually a Exceed researcher that Gibeon himself found and was impressed by. And this is where we learn of Spinel's goals finally, which is that Spinel plans to monopolize the Laqueum for himself and steal it from underneath Gibeon. Hamber informs the three about the rising Voltaclers being there soon and also informs them that Liko is a descendant of Lucius and Ristle, something that Ametheo thought might have been the case. So finally, with all of the information now established, Ametheo now plans on going to Laqua to save his grandfather from Spinel. He trusts his Pokemon and both Zerka and Onia are ready to go with him, and now that he knows everything, he understands his goal. While he might have his grandfather's will, isn't the exact same goal. He's also confident in who he is, and Hamber says that he will aid them in their journey and wishes them luck. As we cut to Laqua with Laqueum, we see some of the Zygarde cells shining. The end of the episode is our heroes coming across Kumari Town. They get jump scared by Rayquaza before it flies off into the mountains above. Freed and the kids are excited to go chase up after it, but Orla fully shuts them down, saying that the ship can't handle doing something like that without just getting blown up. So instead, they decide to land at the town for now, and then later head for the mountains. And this is where we end the episode. This episode is a massive exposition dump, but it's from the villain's side, which is different from what we've gotten in the past. It allows us to see Gibeon's side of the story, and allows us to make a judgment on how much we believe him. It also tells us more about the relationship between Spinel and Gibeon, and it shows us that unlike the other members, Spinel actually is different. He doesn't just act it. It sets up the conflict that the explorers will have in reaching their own goals. They aren't just going against our heroes, they also have an internal threat that they aren't even aware of yet, and also potentially Chalice. I'll get back to that. But the more important thing in this episode was that this episode was made to allow Ametheo and his two minions to get back into the story after a long absence. He is going to be a very integral part of the show moving forward, so it was important to give him an episode like this where we can establish better motives for him, as well as allow us, the audience, to understand him as a character better. Whether that's through learning about his childhood, like the fact that his mother died, or his father seemingly wasn't there to raise him, so he was raised by Hamber, to how he will be different than his grandfather. Despite wanting to save his grandfather and help him reach his goals, he'll have to walk a tightrope in order to figure out who he truly is. I love all of this story and backstory that we're receiving, but my only complaint is I feel like I know everyone in this story except Chalice. Is it Chalice? I'm not fully sure. She's been there since the beginning, and I feel like I hardly know her personality, her goals, her ambition, or how I should even feel about her. She's a part of the explorers and raised by Hamber, yet seems to side and work secretly with Spinel, so I can't tell what side of the conflict she's even in. Maybe that's on purpose, maybe she'll be the ultimate twist villain, who knows, but I just find it hard to care about her or anything she does because the show has done a bad job of telling me why I should care. As far as I see it currently, she could be fully written out of the story, and I don't know if we would have missed her. I hope the writers have something for her because I don't know what she's added to the story, and we're so close to a major climax that if they try to now give her a giant backstory, it's just going to feel massively rushed. I hope I can be proven wrong, but I don't know, we'll see. But other than that, it's a great episode. A must watch in order to catch up to the lore and motivations leading to this upcoming major conflict, and this is definitely reaching a fever pitch climax, so I just can't wait to see how they execute. Episode 84 of Pokemon Horizons, titled The Place Where Heaven and Earth Meet, just dropped, and in this episode, our heroes arrive in Kumari Town to figure out how to get to Laqua. What will they find out? Let's talk about it. After following Rayquaza to where Laqua is, our heroes arrive near Kumari Town. They decide to go down there to learn a bit more about Laqua. It's a small, nice village where it looks like Pokemon and humans live well together. However, as our heroes are walking through the city, they hear someone say that a black Rayquaza is here, meaning disaster will follow. It's from a kid named Yuha who believes this because his Noibat has gone missing, and his great-grandmother told him so. Even though his dad tries to calm him down, he tells our heroes to leave before running away. His father explains to him that the kid believes in things told to him by his great-grandmother, who is over 100 years old. Since that matches the time frame of the previous Laqua expedition, Free tells the kids to go on to poke around the town to see if they can learn anything else, as he wants to talk to Yuha's great-grandmother to learn more about the story. As the kids are walking around, they hear a kid screaming from a nearby cave that sounds like Yuha, so they go inside. And as they're inside, they hear more screaming and see Yuha and his Noibat being chased by a horde of Vibrava before they themselves are chased. Somehow they get away from the horde, but now they're stuck here because there's only one way to leave the cave, which is through the swarm of Vibrava. Yuha says that he came deep in this cave to find his Noibat, but was attacked by Vibrava because of the black Rayquaza, but Roy counters saying that that isn't the case. Either way though, the kids say that they will figure a way out of the situation. While the kids are dealing with all that, Free asks the great-grandmother about the black Rayquaza story, and hearing this makes her perk up, and even put on her teeth at times. She says that she saw it fly out of the mountains when she was 3 years old. Kumari Mountains isn't a volcano, yet she saw a massive explosion there followed by a black Rayquaza. That's why she says disaster follows. The explosion blotted out the sun for 3 days and night, and when the sun came back after 3 days, a scholarly man with long hair came down the mountain. She said that it looked like he had been caught in the explosion, so her mother helped heal his wounds. The great-grandmother tells Free to be careful as he heads up there, and Free thanks her for the story. The kids try to ask the Vibrava to let them through, but it doesn't work, so it's a full-on battle against a group of Pokemon. Everyone brings out all of their Pokemon. Kilowattrel and Tinkatuff both attack and are subsequently healed by Hatchram. Then Quaxwell, Crocolore, and Florigato also attack to thin out the horde even more. As they're battling, Yuha seems impressed by them and determined, as he sends out his Noibat to use Dragon Claw to clear out a path through the middle of the cave. And all the kids leave the cave through that space as the battle comes to an end. Outside, they talk to Yuha and figure out the reason that the Noibat went missing is that when Yuha went deep into the cave to train, he probably accidentally went into the Vibrava's territory, and that Noibat was probably running away from the Vibrava. Realizing this, he apologizes to our heroes and the black Rayquaza before saying how cool they were and how he aims to be in sync with his Pokemon like they were. All three of them encourage him to follow his goals. However, just then, they get a call from Free telling them to meet him in the ship for a meeting as he has information on Laqua. We then see that he's being spied on by Chalice. She leaves as we see that the Exceed Company building is in this area too. In the ship, Free tells everyone that Gibeon is here and that Laqua is at the top of the mountain. Since the brave Olivine won't be able to fly that high, our heroes will have to walk up there, so they bundle up, get prepared, and head to the top of the mountain. The remainder of the episode is just our heroes heading up the mountain and how the other 6 hero Pokemon help them do it. Before that, as Liko is climbing up the mountain, she spots where the Exceed building is, but doesn't get a chance to figure out what it is. As our heroes continue to climb up the mountains, they come across obstacles like higher elevations, waters, rocks, and even Pokemon, and with the help of Terapagos calling for the 6 heroes, our heroes are able to get through all the obstacles. Arboliva helps them climb through a higher elevation, Lapras helps them cross the river, Cleavor helps Lapras break down obstacles in the water, Gouging Fire helps them get rid of a boulder coming down a mountain, Galarian Moltres helps them avoid battling a Nidoking and a Tyranitar, and as they get closer to the top, the clouds cover the area even more. And at the end of the episode, our heroes reach the summit above the clouds near where Laqua is. To me, this episode really only contributes one major thing as our heroes continue their journey to Laqua, and that being that the explorers are here in Kumari Town. Besides that, the disaster thing didn't really lead to much, besides just knowing the story that Gibeon was saved after the explosion. Maybe we'll find out that all the meetings that the explorers did interested was in this area, that would actually be kind of awesome. But besides that, I don't think there's anything else to it. The episode feels like it was laid out strangely because of the two different stories in the episode, which are just split with such like a sharp divide. The second half of the episode feels like it's there to justify why the other 6 hero Pokemon were even needed. And I don't think it's a guess on my part, because Liko literally says that maybe the 6 hero Pokemon helped Lucius get to Laqua. It feels like it was just tacked on because after Rayquaza was caught, there would be no other reason to not go directly into Laqua just by flying his back. I understand why they did it, but it feels like they could have done it a little bit better. Overall though, an alright episode that helps our heroes get to the location they need to be next episode. The art in this episode wasn't the greatest, so I wonder if this means that there's going to be an episode soon here with crazy art and animation coming up, because I'm curious to see how the upcoming visit to Laqua will pan out for everyone, battle and otherwise. Episode 85 of Pokemon Horizons, titled Arrival. The Paradise of Laqua just dropped, and in this episode, our heroes arrive in Laqua. Are they going to find what they're looking for here? Let's talk about it. This episode has two main goals that it tries to accomplish, and it does so in two distinct halves. First, it establishes what Laqua is and what it's like, while trying to create some mystery around it. Second, it sets up the upcoming conflict, and there's a pretty sharp divide between the two halves that you can notice when watching this episode. The episode begins by following our heroes as they arrive at Laqua. Rayquaza eventually clears the clouds and the fog covering the area, revealing the whole area. There's a cute moment here where Rayquaza, tired from the effort, lays down on the mountain and then tells Roy to recall him into the Pokeball, which Roy promptly does. Now that the view is clear, it seems Laqua is located in this crater-shaped formation on top of Mount Kumari. Just like when Lucius and his crew visited, the area is teeming with abundant nature. Grass is super vibrant green, there are fruits and berries everywhere, bigger and apparently more nutritious than usual. As they go deeper, they find all the Pokemon in this area. In Laqua, there are aggressive Pokemon, cute Pokemon, rare Pokemon, and even Pokemon that are supposed to hate each other, and all of them seem relaxed and chilled out. Even the ground is warm, which is unusual for this type of elevation. Freed points out that since this mountain isn't a volcano, something else is causing this strange phenomenon. They stand around and marvel for a while at all the different Pokemon, but this isn't what they came here for. So when Terapagos points them forward, our heroes continue deeper into the jungle in Laqua. They venture further into the forest until Freed calls it a night because darkness is falling. They decide to camp in a field within the forest for the night. That evening, the three kids, Liko, Roy, Dot, reminisce about how far they've come as trainer. We get flashbacks to their journeys from the beginning of them growing with their Pokemon, and Roy talks about how the ancient Pokeball led them to all of this adventure. But Dot notices that Liko looks sad. Turns out that's because Liko's wondering if the adventure will end soon with Terapagos. Roy and Dot reassure that they don't think that'll be the case. After all, Terapagos chose her to be her partner for a reason. Liko says that whatever Terapagos decides, whether to stay in Laqua or to keep adventuring with her, she's gonna respect his wishes. But for now, she just wants to keep adventuring with everyone else. It's a sweet moment, but just as they're about to head to bed, we see that Spinel's Behemoth has teleported away, meaning that they were probably being spied on the whole time. The next morning, our heroes leave the tents they're in and take only the essentials to make walking easier. As they venture deeper into the forest, they encounter a massive rock block in their path. Frida's Cap tries to break it with Thunder Punch, and the rock slightly shatters, revealing a crystal inside. After some discussion, they realize that this is probably the shield that Terapagos made to cover the Lockweum to stop it from spreading and destroying Laqua. Freed thinks that since Terapagos made the shield with Lucius as his partner, maybe he can break it with Liko as his partner. So Liko and Terapagos try it, and Terapagos transforms, using all its energy, and shatters the crystal. It then collapses, drained of energy, so to allow it to rest, Liko recalls it into her Pokeball. Freed decides to scout ahead alone to check for danger. He tells Liko, Roy, and Dot to stand by, but also says, if anything happens, think and act for yourself. That, folks, is what we call foreshadowing. As Freed leaves, what looks like a Zygarde cell to me zooms past Roy. Freed arrives at the big crystals and looks around and thinks maybe that he should go back to where the kids are, but before he can, Spinel arrives behind him. Meanwhile, where the kids were waiting, all of a sudden, Coral, Sidian, and Chalice arrive. With two separate battles looming, that is the end of the episode. Not the greatest episode, I'll admit. Even my script for this video is pretty short, but that's probably because this is a necessary setup episode for possibly the next few episodes. Still, we do get a few cool moments. Rayquaza seems to be growing more respect for Roy. We see how far our heroes have come from the start of the adventure, and yeah, that's partially just filler flashbacks to pad the episodes, but I also think it's a narrative choice to highlight that we're approaching a major climax. We even see the bond between Liko Liko and Terapagos is so deep that Terapagos might actually stay with her after all this. All of it's pretty interesting. But to me, the most interesting part of the episode is Freed's foreshadowing. Like I mentioned earlier, him telling the kids that they can act for themselves is basically a dead giveaway that he's going to be separated from the kids for a majority of this upcoming conflict, letting them take center stage in it. I could be wrong. It could just be the show using Freed's word to acknowledge that Liko, Roy, and Dot have grown enough to be able to deal with any adversity they come across, and we shouldn't be surprised by their battle abilities moving forward. But I'm leaning towards the former. Either way, regardless of what it means, I'll be fascinated to see how the kids are going to handle a conflict like this that's way bigger than themselves, especially with only 2 Pokemon each. Episode 86 of Pokemon Horizons titled The Rising Voltacklers vs. the Explorers just dropped, and in this episode, our heroes take on the Explorers as Gibeon gets closer to what he wants. How will this battle shake out? Let's talk about it. We see Gibeon driving his wheelchair heading towards the crystal while muttering to himself about Laqua, betrayal, and wanting Laquium as the eternal blessings. In front of the broken barrier from last episode, the Explorers have arrived, and Freed and the kids are separated. They learn from the Explorers that they always knew where Laqua was. They've been watching over these lands for some time, and Liko remembers the building she saw while climbing Mount Kumari. However, they needed something to break the barrier, which is why they were after Terapagos, and they basically were manipulating our heroes' journeys to where they are now in order to break this barrier. However, Liko rejects this premise, saying that her adventures with her friends and her Pokemon are hers. They came here for Terapagos specifically, not because of any ploy by the Explorers. Regardless, the Explorers want to now get rid of our heroes, so they're going to battle. There are 2 main battles here, Spinel vs. Freed, and Coral, Sidian, and Chouse vs. Roy, Liko, and Dot. Let's start with the Spinel vs. Freed battle. This one's the more tactical battle. It starts off with a standard battle at first until Spinel has his BEM use Thunderbolt on Charizard. Cap comes in and absorbs the electricity, showing us that Cap has Lightning Rod as its ability. Seeing this, Spinel counters by having Umbreon use Snarl to lower Pikachu's special attack. When Cap goes for Volt Tackle, BEM counters with Skill Swap in order to take the Lightning Rod for himself. This puts Freed in a bad situation now, as Pikachu's kind of useless, so Spinel has Umbreon and BEM just go after Charizard. Cap tries to sneak away and attack Umbreon from a different angle, but BEM teleports in front of it to protect it with Lightning Rod. So Freed has to think on his feet. He has Pikachu jump on top of Charizard and use Double Team to block Umbreon's vision. Pikachu is able to get on top of Umbreon and hold on to it. Freed then terrestrializes Charizard into Dark type to counter BEM. He then has Cap use Thunder Punch, and BEM teleports in front to try and protect Umbreon with Lightning Rod, but then Freed has Charizard use Terra Blast on Umbreon and Cap, and in turn, it hits the BEM that teleported in front, KOing it. Spinel is surprised that Freed would sacrifice his Pikachu, but then is shocked when he sees that Pikachu is just fine, and that's because Skill Swap gave Pikachu BEM's ability, Telepathy, which allows it to not get hit by its allies' move. When Spinel demands to know how he knew BEM's ability, Freed just says it was a hunch, saying no matter how much data he has on him, he can't beat them. This upsets Spinel greatly, who then has Umbreon try to use Snarl, but Freed has Cap use Volt Tackle, a physical attack move, in order to KO Umbreon. On the other battle, our heroes are shocked when they see Coral bring out Screamtail. The other 2 then bring out their respective Pokemon in Garganacl and Medicham. The first bit of the battle is not in our heroes' favor. Coral and Sidian have good double strategy with Boom Burst and Wide Guard, so Garganacl doesn't take damage from Screamtail's Boom Burst. It also has Play Rough for close range combat with Crocalor. Meanwhile, Dot can't seem to land a hit on Chouse's Medicham, who buffs itself with Calm Mind and dodges all of Quaxwell's attacks before firing back. And Liko's Florigato's moves are too predictable. Garganacl is able to block all of Florigato's Magical Leaf with Stone Edge, and later Garganacl doesn't even fall for her setup for Sucker Punch. The first person to come up with the strategy is Dot, who has Quaxwell use Aqua Cutter to make the waterfall all around Medicham, so that eventually Medicham loses footing. And that works when Medicham tries to dodge some air cutters from the side, and it trips on the water on the floor. Quaxwell is then able to get a giant hit in with Aqua Cutter. Seeing Dot's strategy works inspires Liko, and she decides to switch up her movements. She has Florigato move from tree to tree using her Vine and using Acrobatics to do damage. However, Sidian just uses Recover to recover the damage. He says that he doesn't want to drag this battle on longer, so he terrestrializes Garganacl. He uses Stone Edge to clear out the area to get closer to Florigato. However, just then, Liko uses Sucker Punch, and before Florigato gets hit by Salt Cure close range, it's able to trip Garganacl with its Vine. When Garganacl goes down, down, Liko finishes it off by having Florigato use a giant magical leaf. Roy gets fired up seeing this, and his strategy is just to go head on with Flame Charge over and over against Screamtail. Eventually, it misses a Flame Charge while going for it, but then uses that momentum in order to fly in the air and attack with Flamethrower. This enrages Coral, who then also terrestrializes her Screamtail. Roy continues with Flame Charge close range, and then switches to Disarming Voice as Screamtail is going from Boom Burst. It's able to overpower the Boom Burst and send it flying back, KOing Screamtail in the process. As Sidian says to Chalice, the kids are inspiring each other and getting stronger that way. Spinel admits defeat to Freed, but before Freed can respond to him, he's gone. And that's when the ground shakes and we see that in the sky, a massive pink formation is forming. Even Terapagos comes out of its Pokeball. The episode ending with our heroes seeing this Lockwium starting to form from a distance. A very abrupt ending, but this episode felt like it needed one in order to drum up the dramatic tension for next episode. This is a battle-focused episode, so there isn't too much other opinion I have besides what I just thought of the battles themselves, and I will say that I like the battles here. The animation could have been much better, but in terms of the actual battle strategy, I really liked it. It showed off the strengths of all the battlers involved, both the good guys and the bad guys, and all the pairings of the battles also made sense. Spinel and Freed are both extremely smart characters, but Freed has more field experience, which shows through. Meanwhile, Dot is really smart, as so is Chalice, but Dot is more of a tactician that can come up with unpredictable strategies, while Chalice is more of a calculated person. Sidian and Liko are both characters who want to protect others, so their style is just about that. And Roy and Coral are both headstrong characters who just want to keep attacking over and over again. Everyone's characteristics were well shown off, and we got some clever battle tactics shown off too. All of that made for a really well choreographed battle, with the only issue being the lack of animation that I talked about. And the episode's ending adds to the intrigue of what's going to happen next, and I can't wait to see how this arc will proceed, because I really want to know how they're going to be able to stop this crystal. Episode 87 of Pokemon Horizons, titled The Guidance of the Black Rayquaza, just dropped, and in this episode, our heroes finally confront Gibeon. Something major is going to happen here, so let's talk about it. Gibeon arrives at the deepest part of Lockwood with his Zygarde, where a giant crystal Lockwium stands. He says that this massive Lockwium crystal is basically the graveyard of Lucius, marking the spot where the events of the flashback that we saw from Bristol happened. Meanwhile, his white Zygarde summons all of his cells, transforming from his 10% form into its 50% form. Seeing his Pokemon regain his prior strength, Gibeon attempts to stand and do the same, but collapses immediately. He relies on a piece of Lockwium crystal to grant him strength, at least temporarily, and just as he prepares to use his Zygarde to dig up the Lockwium, Ametheo appears behind him. Ametheo tries to plead with his grandfather, telling him that Spinel's trying to take advantage of him by creating a monopoly on Lockwium. He brings up the Lockwium sphere that we first saw a few episodes back in Spinel's computer, but his grandfather seems fine with it. Ametheo then questions whether Lockwium is even righteous due to the pain that it inflicts on Pokemon. Ametheo says he doesn't want his Pokemon to go through that. He says there must be another way to help people in Pokemon, but Gibeon rejects his ideas and instead tells his Zygarde to start digging the Lockwium. This makes the Lockwium react, sending a cloud of smoke into the air that gets everyone's attention nearby. Freed starts flying over to check it out, and before the explorers can keep fighting the kids, Zerk and Onia show up in the battlefield and hold back the explorers' Pokemon. Roy takes a chance to call out his Kilowattrel and head for the Lockwium, while Liko and Dot have their Pokemon use Brutal Swing to clear a path so that they can run over there. Even Freed's Charizard swoops in and uses Flamethrower to stop Coral from chasing the kids. Spinel is there where the Lockwium is being mined. Ametheo and him talk, but he just dismisses Ametheo. Our heroes then show up to where this is happening, and Freed tells the kid that the Lockwium is overflowing, and if Gibeon's able to get the Lockwium that he's mining, it's probably going to make Lockwood collapse again. Terapagos, seeing this, calls the other 6 hero Pokemon. Gibeon starts to panic a bit and tells Zygarde to dig faster, but instead, Zygarde slams into the giant crystal and it cracks. Inside, a person's silhouette. It's Lucius. And seeing this, Gibeon feels betrayed by his Zygarde. We get a bit of an exposition dump here, and it's interesting how they set everything up. It turns out, Lucius is clued in on everything happening in the world thanks to Gibeon's Zygarde cells. For hundreds of years, it had been using its cell from Lockwood and around the world to keep an eye out on whether Lockwium had affected the ecosystem. It saw the Lockwium from Lockwood as a threat. We even seen a bonus scene in the after episode thing for Professor Freed's segment, that thing is only in the Japanese version, that the Zygarde cells had even been keeping a tab on our hero's ship while being invisible, and presumably all the villains too. That's how he knows everything and everyone and their names. It's a smart way to allow Lucius to immediately get into the action without having to get bogged down in the introduction of everything, but it does feel a bit too convenient. At least all of Lucius's Pokemon are thrilled to see him, especially Terapagos. We learn from him that Lockwium isn't even from this planet. Lucius thinks that all it will do is destroy the world. So, to stop Gibeon's ambition, Zygarde sent a message to Lucius' Black Rayquaza to find a trainer worthy of inheriting Terapagos Latios and the 6 heroes. Once our heroes started their adventure, despite Black Rayquaza's will, it didn't directly guide our heroes, and instead it was their own adventures and ambitions to help Terapagos that did. Sure. Gibeon, however, questions if that was the case, why he allowed them to destroy the seal that was protecting the Lacrium and Laqua, and it turns out that's because Lucius wants to get rid of the Lacrium fully, and he thinks that our heroes are the only one who can help him do that. There's a lot of questions here about how Lucius is even alive, but I'm gonna skip over that because I have a feeling that he's not actually there, which is why he's having Liko do everything. Regardless, Gibeon responds and talks about how Lacrium could allow people to live longer and stronger, but Lucius responds and says that he doesn't think they should mess with the natural order of the world. He also says that Laqua doesn't need Lacrium anymore because there's already a flourishing energy cycle there. Lucius also says that humans shouldn't have it because it releases wicked energy and it affects the environment as well as causes Pokemon to go berserk. But Spinel doesn't care about any of that. He just wants to use Lacrium to experiment on and see what it can do and what it has potential to do. Spinel convinces Gibeon to allow him to start the mining operation. Spinel starts up this process by having the other explorers next to a drill, and then he brings out his Magnezone to power it up. We learn here that Gibeon and Spinel are really after the core of the Lacrium. The core would produce Lacrium infinitely, and Lucius says that would be beyond human control, but Spinel responds that they already have science to stop it. I think this is most likely what the Lacrium Sphere thing is about. The mining causes more Lacrium to react, and since freeze Pokemon are weakened from their battle, they're affected by the Lacrium gas, causing them to attack each other and knock each other out. Ametheo tries to stop the machine by having Cerulege attack the machine, but Corals gladly stops it. Lucius then says that he doesn't care if the world perishes from Lacrium because only the people who take up the power of Lacrium should live in this new era. Very Lysander coded. Lucius then tells Liko to have the 6 hero Pokemon give Terapagos strength. Terapagos transforms into its Terrassil form. Gibeon then says that his life has been devoted to Lacrium despite being betrayed by Lucius and Ristle. Lucius tries to talk him out of it, saying that he regrets not talking more to him before and apologizing, but he says it's too late. Gibeon asks White Zygarde to battle for him, even though they believe in completely different things because he's his partner Pokemon. He's lost all of his friends and only Zygarde's been around with him the whole time. And in a shocking and not really making sense turn, Zygarde decides to help Gibeon all of a sudden. Why? Gibeon says that he had intended on Ametheo being an heir to the explorers, but no longer. So instead, Ametheo says that he's going to fight to protect his grandfather. He asks our heroes to come help out in battle, and they decide to do so. The episode ending with everyone terrassalizing, getting ready to battle White Zygarde and Gibeon. This episode has a lot of exposition. The explanation of Lucius feels kind of haphazard. I could understand him surviving because of the Lacrium, that's been established, but Zygarde somehow sharing with him everything that's going on in the world just feels so unbelievable. Regardless though, I do like the fact that the show is making it clear that he isn't the main character anymore. Maybe he was during his day, but Liko's the most important character here. She's the one who gets to call all the other hero Pokemon to lend their strength, and she's the one fighting in the climactic battle, not him. He seems really just to be a plot-relevant device in order to give more background information to our heroes. That's also the case with Freed, who isn't going to be involved in the final battle because his Pokemon have knocked each other out. That's all fine and dandy. The Zygarde thing, though, does not make sense to me. Clearly, Zygarde wants to make sure the world doesn't get destroyed by Lacrium, yet it still chooses to help Gibeon. I don't understand the inconsistency at all. I guess it's trying to say the relationship between a trainer and its Pokemon is so strong, but that can only take you so far when the fate of the world is at stake. Whatever. Now that everything is set up and we know what the final battle is going to be, I'm wondering where the story is going after this. This is the climactic battle. The next episode preview looks absolutely insane in terms of animation. So what's going to happen after that? Will our heroes lose and have to regroup? And if they don't, then what? I have a feeling that maybe Spinel will be the main antagonist going forward. Whether by himself or with the other explorers, that remains to be seen. What are his plans? There's so many questions still swirling around for me, and I'm really fascinated to see how this all comes together. I can't wait. Episode 88 of Pokemon Horizon is titled Shockwaves from the White Zygarde just dropped, and in this episode, our heroes will take on the White Zygarde in a raid-style battle in order to allow Terapagos to charge up. Will they be successful? Let's talk about it. This episode begins with everyone nearby worried due to the massive explosion of Lacrium from last episode. Kumiri Town members are all outside, worried that the Black Rayquaza is bringing misfortune again, and the Rising Bull Tacklers are worried about everyone. Orla's even eyeing the emergency button that's inside the Brave Olivine that we saw a few episodes ago. What that button does, we still don't know, but I have a feeling it will be used soon. Then, we continue where we left off. We learn here that Gibeon Zygarde has its 4 special exclusive moves, so it's a pretty powerful Pokemon. The battle that we get here has a few different sections, but it all leads to something really awesome. The first bit is our heroes trying to attack from a distance, but Zygarde just dodges the moves. Our heroes' Pokemon then try to get closer to attack, especially with Disarming Voice, but Gibeon has Zygarde respond with Land's Rat to counter and get them off their footing. When Ametheo tries to have Cerulege Ledge get close, he's countered with Core Enforcer, which hits everyone. When Roy has Crocolore try to use the environment to attack from the air, Gibeon has Zygarde counter with 1,000 arrows. The other Pokemons luckily manage to dodge it. Then, Ceruledge has to be saved by Florigato for charging in recklessly. They do notice that 1,000 arrows does require a cell to head back to Zygarde, so they decide to attack again and have their Pokemon dodge the 1,000 arrows at first so they can attack. However, as our heroes are getting close to hitting their attacks, Gibeon surprises them by having Zygarde use 1,000 Wave, which also hits everyone. Gibeon's ready to do more major damage with Zygarde as our heroes' Pokemon are down, but in a really dope sequence, Amitheo's Ceruledge uses Phantom Force, and that takes all of our heroes' Pokemon and teleports them above Zygarde, allowing them to attack, and all of them are able to get hits in on Zygarde. That was really clever. There's more counters here as our heroes counter the Core Enforcer only to get hit by 1,000 Wave. After they hang on, they're able to get hits on Zygarde, but Zygarde takes those moves on purpose before countering with Land's Wrath, and that seems to knock our heroes out of their Terrestrial form. It looks like it's over. Florigato barely hung on, and a single attack from Zygarde can stop Terapagos from doing what it's trying to do. However, this isn't an organized battle. This is a battle for survival. So, despite losing its Terrestrial form, which in a regular battle would be a KO, Liko's Florigato can still fight, and it sends back Core Enforcer with its magical leaf. Liko wants to protect everyone and their wishes, so she pushes forward to be right next to Florigato. Dot and Roy go next to their Pokemon and cheer Liko and Florigato on, and with everyone's hopes, Florigato increases its power before a blue light glows. Florigato evolves. It's now a Meowscarada. I really like the fact that just like raid battles from the game, cheering actually helps out the Pokemon, and in this case, it was seemingly able to increase Florigato's overall strength before it evolved into a Meowscarada. Meowscarada's evolution here was exceptionally done, and seeing Meowscarada and Liko's resolve, Amitheo's Ceruledge is inspired and ready to battle again. In another really cool moment, Amitheo tells Liko that his Ceruledge can only do one more attack, and since that won't be enough to defeat Zygarde, his plan is just to create a path for Liko and Meowscarada in order to win. So, the two take on Zygarde. Gibeon has Zygarde use Land's Wrath, but the two Pokemon dodge it. Then Zygarde uses Core Enforcer, but Ceruledge counters Core Enforcer with Bitter Blade and stops it, leaving Zygarde vulnerable. With this opening, Meowscarada is able to use multiple acrobatics to do major damage. Then, she throws her fruit at Zygarde to use Sucker Punch, but Zygarde jumps in the air. When it looks like Zygarde is going to use Core Enforcer from the air to end it, Meowscarada snaps her finger. The fruit in front of Zygarde that she threw earlier explodes, sending Zygarde to the floor. An incredible use of the move Flower Trick, and it looks like that is enough to beat Zygarde. Zygarde does get up again, but it's no longer fighting. It looks back at Gibeon before separating into all its cells and disappearing. The final thing that was around Gibeon now from those long times ago is now also gone, and the explorers are shocked. Gibeon then goes off. He can't believe he lost to these kids. He can't believe he lost to someone of Lucius's bloodline. He asks what sets them apart, and Lucius responds that it's the bond between their partners and themselves. That's what gave them the strength to be the much stronger opponent like Zygarde. Gibeon rejects this, saying there's no science behind sayings like bonds, but Lucius says that because Pokemon are mysterious creatures, they can have miracle abilities that humans just can't quantify. He brings up that those bonds probably helped Florigato evolve into Meowscarada, and even Amitheo says that he felt that bond with the Ceruledge in battle. Lucius says that maybe that's why Zygarde was battling with him, to show him that those types of bonds are possible, and that seemingly gets Gibeon to stop and reflect by looking at his Pokeball. Meanwhile, it looks like finally Terapagos has enough power from the 6 heroes and it's able to transform into its stellar form. As all the 6 hero Pokemon are above the Lockwium Crystal floating inside Terapagos' bubble, that's where we end the episode. This is mostly a battle episode, so most of my talk about this episode is going to be about how I felt about the battle, and personally, I love this battle. If you played Sword and Shield, then you know how difficult a battle Zygarde raids are in Dynamax Adventure, so this feels very similar to that. This battle, feeling almost impossible for our heroes until they're able to figure out strategies, feel very realistic and well done. Zygarde's signature moves here are absurd. All of them affect everyone in the field and are really difficult to counter, so that made the struggle much more real. What I also like is that this uses raid mechanics, but it does it subtly instead of overtly. Specifically the cheering mechanic. Dot and Roy's cheering helps Florigato, and this is something that the anime has been doing for a long time, but now that it's also a part of the game, it's cool to see how both the games and the anime are now tying back to each other. I also like that Zygarde got our heroes' respect, which is why it stopped battling. It approves of everyone, but just not Gibeon. So even though it battled with him, and it showed him that the bonds between Pokemon and human are important, Gibeon didn't seemingly understand, which is why it left him. It's both a physical but also emotional emotional loss for someone like Gibeon, who had this weird relationship with his Pokemon. Zygarde leaving Gibeon, and now the explanation that Lucius gave, I wonder where Gibeon goes from here as a character. Will he pass away soon because he is old now that he doesn't have his partner, and what he's searching for in Lockrium might be gone next episode? I'm curious to find out. The Meowscarada evolution, let's talk about that a little bit, felt really meaningful and was incredibly well done. That includes both the narrative side and the animation side. Speaking of which, the animation in this episode was great. Terrestrial Pokemon tend not to last in the anime because the crystal and the lighting and everything involved makes it not stand out in the best way, but the use of Locqua's background of pinks, along with the multitude of colors due to all the terrestrial Pokemon available here, made everything look really nice. Overall, the animation for this episode was really well done. Now that Terrapagos has turned into its stellar form, it looks like Lockrium is about to be purified, but I don't trust Spinel. It feels like he has something major hidden in his back pocket, and I'm not talking about the thing that was shown in the next episode preview. I just mean in general, because since Gibeon doesn't have his Pokemon anymore, he's no longer the threat, and if that's the case, I can see Spinel taking over as the Explorer's leader and doing something else. I'm not sure what that could be. It feels like there's still so many mysteries and questions lingering around this series. Even things like that button in the ship, what is it gonna do? Stuff like that makes me continuously curious as to where this story is heading, and I can't wait to see what's happening next. Overall though, this is a phenomenal episode. I really liked it. Episode 89 of Pokemon Horizons, titled At the End of the Adventure, just dropped, and this is the final episode of Pokemon Horizons Pre-Timeskip, where our heroes have to try and escape Laqua. Why? Let's talk about it. Continuing from last episode, as Terrapagos in his stellar form is in the air with all the 6 hero Pokemon, it uses its powers to make the Lockrium crystal disappear. As Gibeon is on the floor, devastated that his wishes can't true anymore, Meteo talks to Gibeon. He tells him that he knows that he founded Exceed Corporation for the development of people and Pokemon, so as his grandson, he'll try to carry out his will and do that, but without using Lockrium. Gibeon says that he has no right to speak about the future of people and Pokemon, but Lucius tells him that that isn't true. The old him, who was a scientist, truly wished for happiness of people and Pokemon, and that's why Zygarde chose him to be his partner. And hearing this seemingly shocks Gibeon. Lucius then tells him that the future isn't something they can control, all they can do is believe in the next generation. And with that, he and Gibeon start fading away. As he's disappearing, he tells Liko that passing on Zygarde and Rayquaza's feelings and having her purify the Lockrium was his final mission. He thanks all of his Pokemon, tells Liko to take care of Terrapagos. Lucius then tells Gibeon that Listel is waiting for them and that their adventure isn't over. As he's fading away, Gibeon tells Ametheo to walk the path he believes in together with Ceruledge before the two disappear. Now that Lucius is gone, the ancient Pokeball are all open, meaning all the Pokemon have been released. As Fried says, they'll probably go back into the wild. However, just then, Spinel steps up. He talks about how he thought he was going to inherit Gibeon's will, but now that Gibeon's gone, he's going to surpass him. So he brings out the actual Lockrium sphere that was brought up a couple episodes ago. This thing has Lockrium gas inside of it, and it surrounds all the hero Pokemon. It causes them to be enraged and fight against each other, causing destruction in the area. He then says that from now on, Laqua will be occupied by the explorers. Terrapagos is too out of energy to do something about it, and Liko tries to get them to stop, but she gets a move thrown her way for that. However, Rayquaza seemingly isn't affected by this, as it protects Liko and the kids from getting hit with the blast. Rayquaza then nods at our heroes, and it seemingly tells them to leave Laqua, and this is also true for Ametheo. Zerk and Oni arrive, and Ametheo brings out his Corviknight and flies away with them. Our heroes then return their Pokemon before running out of Laqua themselves. As they're doing that, Fried brings up the question that I'm sure everyone was asking. Since the Lockrium is gone, what's the point of the explorers having Laqua? As our heroes are standing there, the ground beneath them cracks, and Liko falls backwards, and with it, the belt of Lucius with all of his Pokeball holders, his journal that he wrote, along with his picture, all fall through the crack underground somewhere. Our heroes are devastated, but Fried tells them that the story of the ancient adventurer will remain as long as they remember it. Fried then wishes he could fly, but that's when Hatterene comes out of Liko's Pokeball. With it out, they realize that they can heal Charizard, so Hatterene does just that, and our heroes hop on the Charizard and fly away. Even though the conditions are really rough, extremely windy, eventually our heroes are able to get to the edge of Laqua. But they still need to go down the mountain, and Fried says that it's too dangerous to go down the mountain now, presumably because you don't want rock slides from the mountain shaking. However, just as Fried says they have reliable friends, we see that the brave Olivon is trying to get to where they're at. It seemingly, however, cannot because they're too high, so that's when they decide to use its secret button. The button, as I guessed, is a jet engine boost to the ship. Fried calls it the Brave Olivine Infinite Rising. Our heroes manage to get in the ship itself, however, they're still in the deck, so as they're flying on top of Laqua, the wind starts picking up even more, and it sends Fried and his Pokemon flying. They're able to hang on for a bit, and our heroes try to help them out. Fried picks up Cap and is able to get them to our heroes, but eventually he and Charizard can no longer hold on, and they go tumbling down the ship. I think we all knew something was happening to Freed, and this moment here explains why Roy has Cap in the next arc. Is Freed truly gone from the series? I presume probably not, but this is a good way to write him off, at least for the time being, to allow our heroes to face off against issues without having someone there strong to do it himself. We then skip 1 year later, and we see Liko back in her school as she has drawings about her adventure. We also see that in this 1 year time frame, somehow, Spinel is now the president of Exceed Company and has seemingly kicked out Amethio's father from that position. And now, he has also managed to twist the story, saying that the Rising Volt Tacklers were the one who destroyed Laqua, but thanks to Exceed, they're reclaiming that lost nature. And when asked about rumors that Pokemon there are experiencing unknown side effects, he tells them that the Explorers are dealing with it, and that under the Explorers, everyone can be rest assured. What a conniving villain. The episode ends with us getting a look at Roy's new look along with his Pokemon, which now includes a shiny Lucario. I'm surprised they were able to fit in as much of the story as they did here. Smartly, they did a lot of showing and not telling, while keeping more mysteries about the story and the questions regarding the world going. How does Spinel take over the entirety of Exceed Company? Why are the Explorers still trying to take over Laqua? What's Spinel's next goal? Where's Amethio? Where's his father? Where's he in the time skip? Is Freed alive? All of this is still up in the air as we try to figure out where the story is headed. The episode itself felt well paced despite having to resolve a bunch of things, one of them being resolving the story of Lucius and Gibeon. I'm not surprised about Lucius disappearing after his arc is over, but to me logistically it makes no sense for Gibeon to be disappearing like that too instead of aging normally and dying. He was staying alive using Lacuum, sure, but he had its physical body and being. He wasn't being kept alive by some giant Lacuum crystal and Zygarde like Lucius was. I could imagine Lucius being more metaphysical than actually a real person, which is why I pointed out 2 episodes ago that he was having Liko do everything instead of him doing it himself, because he really couldn't. But for Gibeon, that makes no sense. It's just a narrative convenience, not actual logic there, and we accept it because it works, although Amethio strangely seems to not really care that his grandfather was just disappearing in front of him. That's bizarre. Regardless, this episode leaves a lot of questions in the air as to what the Explorers and Spinel will specifically be after next. Personally, I'm curious to see how much of the Legends ZA plotline will be used here, if any. Or will it be like the first part of Horizons where it's just wholly original while using some bits of the game plot? Time will tell, I guess. Let's talk about the time skip since it's already here. I don't think they want to redesign any of the game characters separately just for the anime, so this is probably the end of the Scarlet and Violet kid group. Although since the time skip's relatively short, it's possible for characters like Perrin, who said she wants to see them in the future, to come back without making any significant changes. The character design for Roy feels a lot older than a single year. He fully almost changes in this single year and looks like he will be the main focus of the show going forward. It's surprising that in the years that he managed to grow, catch a shiny Lucario, is Crocodile remain the same. Maybe it's waiting to see Charizard again before evolving, because Charizard is his hero. Same with Liko actually, whose Pokemon also haven't evolved after the year. Hers makes a bit more sense because she's in school. Her design seemingly hasn't changed that much. She does have different hairstyles and seems to be taller, but besides that, nothing too different. Dot also has a substantial change. She's wearing longer clothing while also being taller. And Alt, well, I don't really like his design, but I guess we'll have to see what type of character he is. Maybe I'll like him in the future, who knows. I just can't wait to see where the story goes from here. But what about you guys? What did you guys think about this whole episode? What did you guys think about this whole arc? What did you think about the first part of Horizon pre-Timeskip, as well as the upcoming arc that we're going to see? Let me know all of it in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. Like, share, subscribe, and I will talk to you guys later. Peace.